Adrian N. Breitfelder, City Clerk, you are hereby directed to call a regular session of the City Council to be held on Monday, April 6th, 2026 at 6:30 p.m. in the historic Federal Building for the purpose of conducting such business that may properly come before the City Council.
Thank you. Good evening and welcome to a regular session of the Dubuque City Council for April 6th, 2026. As a reminder to our participants, you can provide in-person input or virtual audio and written input during the sections of the agenda where public input is accepted. Input options during the live meeting include: in-person attendees may approach the podium when the mayor asks if there is any public input on the item they would like to speak to. Remote attendees can log in to GoToMeeting using the login links, phone numbers, and access code that appear on the broadcast and live stream and posted on the front page of the meeting agenda. This option includes audio input and written chat input. If you are participating via computer, indicate which item you would like to speak to in the chat function or note that you would like to speak during the appropriate section. If you are participating via phone, indicate which item you would like to speak to during the appropriate section. All comments, whether in person or virtual, must be accompanied by a name and address. Additionally, written public input is accepted by contacting the City Council directly from the city's webpage at www.cityofdubuque.org/councilcontacts and through the City Clerk's office email at ctyclerk@cityofdubuque.org. This information will be reiterated during the meeting. Attendance for the session is as follows: Mayor Kavanaugh.
Here.
Council members Leyendecker.
Here.
Resnick.
Here.
Roussel. Sprank.
Here.
Staver.
Here.
Wethel.
Here.
City Manager Van Milligan.
Here.
And City Attorney Brumwell.
Here.
Thank you, Mayor Kavanaugh. I'll turn it over to you for the Pledge of Allegiance.
All right, thank you, Adrian. I invite all who are able to please rise and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our presentation this evening is completion of Georgia Smoke Diver Program recognition.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Amy Scheller, Fire Chief, Dubuque Fire Department. I'm joined today by Fire Equipment Operator Chris Kleesner and Bureau Chief of Training Marty Fitzpatrick. The Georgia Smoke Diver Program is widely regarded as one of the most physically and mentally demanding training programs in the fire service across the United States. Established to enhance firefighter survivability and operational effectiveness in extreme fireground conditions, the program pushes participants well beyond conventional training. Spanning multiple days of continuous high-intensity scenarios, candidates are subjected to rigorous evolutions designed to simulate real-world, worst-case scenarios. These include prolonged interior firefighting operations in zero visibility, complex search and rescue scenarios requiring advanced problem-solving under extreme scenarios, heavy physical exertion while operating in full protective equipment, including an SCBA, that's the air pack that we wear, limited rest and recovery periods, testing endurance, mental toughness, and decision-making capabilities, team-based evolutions that demand trust, communication, and accountability under extreme fatigue. The program is intentionally structured to identify and develop firefighters who can perform effectively when conditions are at their worst, when conditions are most dangerous and unpredictable. Attrition rates are significant. The members that drop out of this program are high. There's a high number, and successful completion is considered a rare and distinguished accomplishment within the fire service. Fire equipment operator Kleesner's ability to persevere through this environment speaks to his exceptional physical fitness, mental resilience, technical proficiency, and unwavering commitment to excellence. His performance not only reflects personal achievement, but also demonstrates the caliber of training and professionalism within the Dubuque Fire Department. Chris graduated from the Georgia Smoke Diver Program. This graduation represents more than just an individual milestone. It enhances the operational readiness and capability of our entire organization. The knowledge, skills, and leadership qualities gained through this experience will be shared with fellow members, strengthening our collective ability to respond safely and effectively in high-risk incidents. His accomplishments serve as an inspiration to others within the department, reinforces our organizational commitment to continuous improvement, advanced training, and firefighter safety. We just we just welcomed 5 new members of the organization. So what better role model than Chris to present in front of them? I know we had great conversations when you were being selected in the interview process or the application process. So I just wanted to take a moment to congratulate Chris, because he's here with his wife Bailey. This is a significant accomplishment for our organization and for the city of Dubuque. There's only 3 in the state of Iowa. So just wanted to take a moment to thank and show some appreciation and congratulate Chris on his.
Thank you, Chief. Well, FEO Kleesner, this is incredibly impressive. I just want you to know that everybody here in the entire city of Dubuque is incredibly proud of you for what you've accomplished, and what you've accomplished not just on your own behalf, but for the whole fire department. You have really done something very special here, so thank you very much for taking the time and the effort to do it and having the dedication for it. It speaks just volumes. It speaks volumes of you. It speaks volumes of you, Chief, and everybody that's involved in the fire department and everybody in the city of Dubuque. So thank you so much for your work. Yeah.
We'll move on to proclamations. Our proclamation this evening is Sibling Support Day.
All right, I believe we have Tara Conley here. So Tara, if you want to come on up, you can feel free to say a few words before I read the proclamation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Council. And Adrian, thank you so much for your support. My name is Tara Conley, and I'm the founder of Supporting Illinois Brothers and Sisters, also known as SIBS. And I'm also a sibling of a person with a disability. My brother Nick, who had intellectual and developmental disabilities, is the inspiration behind my work. SIBS was founded 18 years ago in Illinois, specifically to support siblings who have a brother or sister with disabilities across the lifespan. Because too often siblings are part of the story, but not always part of the support. I want to sincerely thank Mayor Kavanaugh and the Dubuque City Council for recognizing and accepting the Sibling Support Day proclamation. This acknowledgement means more than you may realize, not just to me, but to siblings across this community. National Sibling Day is coming up, as you may know, each year. It's celebrated on April 10th, and it honors the longest-lasting relationships we have in our lives, our brothers and sisters. But for siblings of individuals with disabilities, it carries an even deeper meaning. Sibling Support Day recognizes the unique roles siblings often hold as supporters, advocates, and over time, lifelong caregivers. Many siblings grow up with deep love and pride for their brother or sister, but also with many responsibilities and challenges that are not always seen or talked about. And as parents age and services change, siblings are often the ones who remain, walking alongside their brother or sister across the lifespan, often longer than their parents, if you think about that. Since moving to the Dubuque area 4 years ago, I've been working to find and connect with other siblings here. I've begun building a small network, but I know that there are many more out there that I need to find. What I've learned is this: siblings are here, but many are still looking for connection, for understanding, and for a place to belong. My hope is that this proclamation helps change that it opens doors for siblings to find each other, to find me, to feel seen, and to know that they're not alone. Because this proclamation is not just recognition, it's an invitation. It's an invitation to include siblings, to support them, and to strengthen families by acknowledging the roles siblings already play every day. So thank you, Mayor Kavanaugh and the City Council for your leadership to help elevate the voices of siblings here in Dubuque. This truly matters, so thank you so much.
Well, Tara, thank you so much for being here and for providing this proclamation for the first time. I know this is a new one, so we appreciate your bringing this forward so we can learn a little bit more about the organization and the things that are going on and Sibling Support Day. It's a great thing to be able to celebrate in the City of Dubuque, so thank you so much for being here to accept this proclamation. City of Dubuque Proclamation. Whereas siblings of individuals with disabilities play an essential and often lifelong role in support, advocacy, and long-term stability and care of their brothers and sisters. And whereas siblings frequently provide emotional support and practical assistance across the lifespan while helping their brothers and sisters navigate education, healthcare, employment, housing, and community life. And whereas siblings are often the longest lasting relationship in a person's life, continuing to provide connection and support as families and services and service systems evolve. And whereas siblings balance these responsibilities while pursuing their own education, careers, and families, often without formal recognition or support. And whereas recognizing and supporting siblings is an important part of strengthening whole family approaches to disability support, promotes inclusive communities, and contributes to improved outcomes for individuals with disabilities across Dubuque and beyond. And whereas siblings are a vital yet often unrecognized part of the support network that helps individuals with disabilities live full and meaningful lives. And whereas organizations such as Supporting Illinois Brothers and Sisters, SIBS, work to ensure siblings have access to peer support, education, leadership opportunities, and community connections in the Dubuque area. And whereas National Sibling Support Day provides an opportunity to recognize the contributions, resilience, and dedication of siblings who play an essential role in lives of individuals with disabilities and their families. Now, therefore, I, Brad M. Kavanaugh, Mayor of the City of Dubuque, Iowa, on behalf of the City Council staff and residents of Dubuque, do hereby proclaim the month of April 2026 as Sibling Support Month in the Dubuque of Iowa, in the City of Dubuque, Iowa.
We'll now move on to consent items. At this time, anyone participating in the meeting in person who would like to discuss one of the consent items, please approach the podium when the mayor asks if there is any in-person input and state your name and address. For all remote attendees, please enter your name and address in the chat function or state your name and address over the phone when the mayor asks if there is any virtual input. If more than one participant would like to speak, then city staff will determine the speaking order of the participants. Please state the item you would like removed from the consent agenda for separate discussion and consideration, and consent items can be found on pages 2 through 6 of the agenda.
All right, thank you, Adrian. Do we have anyone here in chambers who would like to remove any of the consent items for separate discussion this evening? Seeing no one here, do we have anyone virtually? Okay.
No input.
All right. I'll bring it back to the table. I will note that I need to remove number 12, please. And Ms. Russell, I think you might have.
Yes, I'll hold item 5, please.
Okay. Any others that need to be held for separate discussion this evening? Yes, Mr. Staver. Number 8. So we have number 5, number 8, and number 12 here.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, Mr.
I move to receive and file the documents, adopt the resolutions, and deal with the consent items as recommended, except for number 5, number 8, and number 12.
Second.
I've got a motion by Resnick, second by Wethel. Adrian, would you call the roll, please?
Kavanaugh.
Aye.
Resnick.
Aye.
Staver.
Aye.
Wethel.
Aye.
Roussel.
Aye.
Sprank.
Aye.
Lyon-Decker.
Aye.
That motion passes 7-0. We'll move on to consent item number 5. I need a motion to put this on the table, please.
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, Ms. Russell.
I move to add item number 5 to receive and file and approve.
All right.
Second?
Got a motion by Russell, second by Resnick. Ms. Russell, please.
I would just like to, and I did receive a little more information on this item, but I would like to just have a little bit of a discussion about how this works. It looks like we're adding 2 purchasing and safety interns. And my understanding is that by utilizing interns, we are very effectively getting this service taken care of and also getting a service to the local college students who participate. But, let's see. Then there were some funds from, workman's comp that we weren't expecting to have, that now that we do have. And I want to make it clear that for this particular time frame, the cost of these interns is covered. And so I was unsure about moving forward until I had a better understanding of how those were going to be paid for. I feel very comfortable now that there is funding, and for this particular time frame that we're asking, I'm comfortable with moving forward.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Russell. Do we want any clarification from staff at all in this discussion, or?
So,
Yeah, please, Mike.
Tony Breitbach, our safety officer, is here and purchasing agent, and he could give a summary of what we're trying to accomplish here.
Okay.
Good evening, everyone. Tony Breitbach, Purchasing and Risk Manager for the City of Dubuque. First off, thank you, everyone at this here tonight and our city employees. Our work comp, as mentioned earlier, has made significant strides forward, and that is with your decisions of bringing a staff member on as purchasing safety coordinator, and our decision of allowing additional training and resources for our staff, and that goes to the city manager as well. I commend him 100% into all of our employees. They have made significant strides, and I just want to tote the horn for a second. We took our work comp mod from a 1.3 to a 0.85 with a 1 being average. So we made a significant stride, in the direction of where we're heading for our employees, right? Our number one resource at the city of Dubuque, and I firmly believe that moving forward. So with the work comp mod, it's a factor of our audited payroll data and our claims data. So as we move that down, last year we anticipated it was about $156,000 savings from budget to actual on work comp because our mod decreased. This year, they broke the news to us. IMWCA, our carrier, who's done a fantastic job as our partner, and it's gone approximately $201,000 we anticipate saving. Now, work comp is fluid, right? Something could happen tonight. We have 24-hour shifts. We have a lot of things going. Our employees are number one priority, as I mentioned earlier, from our safety and risk side. So as we move forward, we're in a phase where we felt it was best as a team we discussed in bringing the interns on board because our consultants would be significantly cost prohibited to a degree of where we feel in this phase we should be at. So as we move forward, we anticipate that we'll continue to see that number lower. Now, I must say it is impressive where we are at as a city of Dubuque with all the factors considered as far as the resources that we provide our citizens from public works, from fire, from police, and those exposures. So yes, I anticipate it to be consistent. That doesn't happen overnight. This has been a long process. And as I mentioned, I can't thank you all enough for the support that we've had towards our employees and their number one priority, their safety, right, to go home every day. So I anticipate that it will be consistent as far as continuing that downward trend. That comes with these phased approach, right? Over the last, I would say, 5 years, we've been phasing it in, different aspects, and really commending our employees and you for what you've done. So this is a piece of that pie, and as we continue to phase to where we want to be, I do see the savings there. Our employees are 110% on board. Our management is behind it, and I can't thank them enough. Now, that could change naturally, but this is a factor that we use to make sure that doesn't change and that trends in the right direction, which is down. Yep. Does that help, I hope?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, thank you.
Any other questions or clarification needed on this? Okay. Thank you very much,
Thank
Tony.
you.
Appreciate it. Seeing none other than we have a motion here to receive and file and approve. Adrian, would you call the roll, please?
Kavanaugh.
Aye.
Resnick.
Aye.
Staver.
Aye.
Wethel.
Aye.
Roussel.
Aye.
Spring.
Aye.
Lyon-Decker.
Aye.
Passes 7-0. Next is number 8. This is signed contracts. I'll need a motion, please.
Mr. Mayor,
Ms. Russell?
I move to receive and file item 8.
Second by Sprank.
Got a motion by Russell, second by Sprank. So, Mr. Staver, you had a question or discussion about this?
Yeah, and that's probably because I'm just new here, but before we move through it, I just wanted to understand, all these contracts, have most of them come before council already? Or are some of these contracts just operating procedure after the fact, or any of these contracts? Is there so many on here because of the time of the year, I'm assuming? And we're playing catch-up kind of, or we're trying to get this stuff done?
I'm gonna turn it over to Mike, because this is a newer thing. So it's not just because you're new, it's because it is new. So I thought I'd turn it over to Mike to be able to explain a little more.
Yeah, you gave us a lot of choices there for an answer, but the answer is it is a new thing with a lot of these. So there are routine annual contracts that we have that will be on this list, but it's always in the past been a much shorter list. But what we've done now is, and this is between our purchasing officer and the city attorney's office, is we have a lot of arrangements with, for example, the fire department will have an arrangement with a plumbing firm that when something happens at one of the stations, they know, you just call that firm and they'll show up and fix your plumbing for you. In the past, we never had an agreement with those businesses. We just had, everybody knew who you call.
Right.
And there's all the different departments have all those different kinds of arrangements. So what was decided is with each party that provides us a service, we have to have a contract. And so now, like for instance, I think there's 140 or something like that just out of Public Works. So yes, so you're going to see a lot more of these until we get all those established. And once we get established, then they'll just become routine contracts, and so the list will get shorter again.
Okay, so once they're established, they kind of auto-renew and they won't end up on this list again?
I'm pretty sure that's generally, I guess, unless there was like update in our requirements in our contracts. I don't know, Krenna, do you want to?
The only other thing I was going to add is the council has periodically over the years provided a resolution authorizing the city manager to sign certain contracts. So think insurance renewals, leases of 3 years or less, because anything more than 3 years requires a public hearing of the city council, contracts under certain dollar amounts, things like that. So you all, as a body, have delegated that to the city manager. But as a requirement of that, you will see signed contracts on the consent agenda of every single agenda that comes before you. And Mike includes what he signs under that authority, so you are aware of the things that come to him for signing pursuant to that authority.
How would we know the difference between, like, a new member like myself, how would I know the difference between a routine contract like that or something that's come before council already and been approved by council?
So the
Prior council.
Yeah, the resolution contains a list of the specific things that Mike is authorized to sign. So those would appear on here, but when you look, this is really more of a short-term kind of thing, as Mike mentioned, as we're getting into the new contracting module of the finance system and things like that. So what you're going to see is that that's going to shrink down, and it's going to be the list of 5 to 10 things that Mike signs as a matter of routine. To know, you would probably have to open up each contract, which should be attached, but it would tell you what it is for and like the period of time, the type of service, things
But
like
you wouldn't
that.
expect me to understand what he's approved to sign and not sign and what hasn't been for, open up each contract and know that?
Well, or you can ask, and we can always answer that very easily. Or if it would be useful for the, what we're calling the
50 contracts.
the master services agreements type of thing, what we could do is we could probably provide a spreadsheet of some sort that says, here are all of the master service agreements that are being entered into.
Yeah, I think that'd be helpful. I mean, it's just, for me, it feels like I'm, just blanket approving a whole bunch of contracts without a lot of context. But that was my only concern. I think going forward, I would personally would like to know, which ones are routine and which ones have been voted on prior, if that's possible.
Okay,
I think it'd be helpful.
we can see if we can put that together.
Thanks. That's it.
Corinna, what kind of contracts remind me what kind of contracts we'd be voting on in a public forum like this versus voting on like a resolution to move forward with something, and then there's a contract involved with that. So
For example, city manager can do things related to workers' compensation, as Mr. Breitbach mentioned a little earlier. Insurance renewals, because that's just an annual matter of process or procedure. Leases, 3 years or less, he is allowed to sign under state code without public hearing and council authorization. Purchases of goods and services, and then contracts for other things, $500,000 or less. So anything that is outside those parameters would come to you. Oftentimes, the resolution, the action that you take approves the action and authorizes either the mayor or the city manager to sign that. Or, for example, in some cases, you approve negotiating the agreement, finalizing the agreement, and then having the city manager sign it. So if, let's say there was a $750,000 contract, that would be beyond that general authority. So it would come to you for, approval information to ask questions. If the contract was already negotiated, it would likely be included and would have your signature on it. If it still needed to be negotiated, then it likely would request authority to the city manager to negotiate and sign that agreement.
So is it possible to do what Mr. Staver is asking? I mean, is it easy enough for us to have a list of, that explains a little bit more of what these contracts are as we go through this process that is a new process?
For these master services agreements, I think that is doable.
Okay. Well, that's good enough then. Yeah, Ms. Roussel?
I also thought perhaps it'd be helpful if the label on this section said signed or contracts signed under the resolution giving city manager authorization to do so, or?
Typically, they're all going to be that.
So, I mean, could you just label it that? I mean, to make it
Reference the resolution
clearer
number,
for-
we could.
I would just briefly though, I mean, there's going to be a general expectation that the city manager's been authorized to do his job. So I think that in a way, we have to just be comfortable with the fact that the city manager, we've authorized the city manager to do his job and to sign contracts. It's part of what he does. So I think it's okay to get more of an explanation of what this is so we have a better understanding of it. But I also don't think that, and this will be part of the budget conference, we should not be in the process or in the business of getting it too far into the weeds of what is going on with with all the things that our city manager has to do on a daily basis. So in this case, since this is, I mean, you're right, Mr. Staver, I agree with you. This is a long list right here. So I think that it makes sense to just have a better understanding of what these are and how they, if there's something that's already been approved by council or if it's just a routine contract that is a part of the day-to-day operations of the city, I think that's fine. But I think that's about my opinion would be that's about as far as we should go in this particular situation. Yeah, Ms. Wethel.
If I could just make a couple statements. Number one is that a lot of the things that I read through in these contracts are things I'm more familiar with because the more I've been on council, the more I've heard about them either in the community or as things come before us. So for instance, the PEG Access Channel Operator Equipment Grant Award Agreement, I've heard about that before and known about it. And so I guess it doesn't come surprising to me that we're just gonna formally make sure that that is now in writing as a formal contract that comes before council. So things like that, I mean, I just want to give you the benefit of the doubt because there's a lot of things on here that I would say since I joined council in April of 22 have in some way, shape, or form come before council in a way that I knew a little bit more about them before I reread all of these. So, yeah.
Mr. Spring, go ahead.
Well, actually, Chris, I agree with a lot of this. I was going to actually vote, or I was actually going to say I have to abstain from voting on this one because my nonprofit that I'm involved with is going to be receiving a community building grant program agreement. So that's also in this in this item. So I would not be voting on this one.
So thank you, Mr. Spring. So Krenna, in that case, I want to make sure that we're doing the right thing on that because there's a whole bunch of contracts here, and I hate for Mr. Spring to have to back out of the whole thing because of one contract. Is the signing of the contract something that we need to be concerned about in terms of or is it actually well, I mean, just please.
At this point, it's just receive and file. You aren't taking any action on it. So at this point, voting for receive and file, this is just notice that these things have been signed. So I don't think you would have a conflict there.
Okay.
Well, there you go. Okay. That's helpful. Thank you. Okay. This is good discussion. I think we clarified a few things here. Do you have any other clarifications needed? Okay. Motion here is to receive and file. So Adrian, would you call the roll, please?
Kavanaugh.
Aye.
Resnick.
Aye.
Staver.
Aye.
Wethel.
Aye.
Roussel.
Aye.
Sprank.
Aye.
Liondecker.
Aye.
That motion passes 7-0. Next up is number 12. So if I get a motion on this last consent item, please.
Mr. Mayor,
Ms. Roussel.
I move to receive and file and adopt the resolution for item 12.
Second by Wethel.
Got a motion by Roussel, second by Wethel. The reason I'm holding this one is because this is for Crescent Community Health Center, and my wife Jennifer works with Crescent Community Health Center in an executive position. So even though technically I'm not profiting from this particular agreement, and she really isn't either, her organization is. This is a contract, or this is a community development block grant funds that are going to Crescent Community Health Center. So I would choose to abstain from this item, please. And so I will just note that when Adrian calls the roll. Any further discussion? Okay. Motion here is to receive and file and adopt the resolution. Adrian, would you call the roll, please?
Resnick.
Aye.
Staver.
Aye.
Wethel.
Aye.
Roussel.
Aye.
Sprank.
Aye.
Liondecker.
Aye.
That motion passes 6 ayes and 1 abstention.
We'll move on to items set for public hearing. We have 11. First is resolution setting a public hearing on a collateral assignment of development agreement by and between the City of Dubuque, Iowa and HG APT LLC, assigning rights to Bellevue State Bank for the redevelopment of 2901 Central Avenue. Second is resolution setting a public hearing on a proposed development agreement by and between the City of Dubuque, Iowa and Iron Creek Group LLC, providing for the issuance of urban renewal tax increment revenue grant obligations pursuant to the development agreement. Third is resolution setting a public hearing on a proposed development agreement by and between the City of Dubuque, Iowa and Miller Development LLC, providing for the issuance of urban renewal tax increment revenue grant obligations pursuant to the development agreement. Fourth is consent to assignment of development agreement by and between the City of Dubuque, Iowa and Carmack Management Incorporated to Linseed Lofts LLC. Fifth is consent to assignment of development agreement by and between the City of Dubuque, Iowa and Outfly Development LLC to Verena Court Exchange LLC. Sixth is 2026 Public Works Asphalt Overlay Program Sidewalk Curb Ramp Project, Bid Package 4. Initiate public bidding process and setting date for a public hearing. Seventh is Public Works Concrete Banding and Crack Sealing Project. Initiate public bidding process and setting date for a public hearing. Eighth is setting a public hearing for the Residential Parking Permit District Amendment, District A. 9 is grant of easement to Holy Family Catholic Schools. 10th is setting a public hearing for a lease agreement by and between the City of Dubuque, Iowa and the Dubuque Children's Zoo Boosters Incorporated. And 11th is 2026 Pavement Marking Project, initiate public bidding process and setting date for a public hearing, all for April 20th, 2026.
Mr. Mayor,
Ms. Wethel.
I move to receive and file and adopt the resolutions setting the public hearings each for April 20th, 2026.
Second.
Got a motion by Wethel and a second by Roussel. And we are about to have a very busy April 20th. Adrian, would you call the roll, please?
Kavanaugh.
Aye.
Resnick.
Aye.
Staver.
Aye.
Wethel.
Aye.
Roussel.
Aye.
Sprank.
Aye.
Liondecker.
Aye.
That motion passes 7-0.
We'll move on to boards and commissions. We have application review for the Housing Commission.
All right, we have one 3-year term that runs through August 17th, 2027, and one applicant, Kathy Mock Dickens. Do we have anyone here to speak to this application this evening? Seeing no one here, anyone virtually?
No input.
All right, then we can move on to public hearings, please.
At this time, anyone participating in the meeting in person who would like to discuss one of the public hearing items, please approach the podium when the mayor asks if there's any in-person input for the public hearing you would like to speak to and state your name and address. For all remote attendees, please enter your name and address in the chat function and state your question, or state your name and address over the phone when the mayor asks if there is any virtual input for the public hearing you would like to speak to. If more than one participant would like to speak, then city staff will determine the speaking order of the participants. Public hearing number 1 is public hearing for the adoption of the Public Housing Authority Annual Plan for Federal Fiscal Year 2026.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Resnick.
I move to receive and file and adopt the resolution.
Second by Wethel.
Motion by Resnick, second by Wethel. Mike, please.
Thank you. Housing and Community Development Director Maddie Haverland is recommending City Council input on the Public Housing Authority Annual Plan and approve the adoption of the Public Housing Authority Annual Plan for federal fiscal year 2026. The annual plan was reviewed by the Housing Commission on January 27, 2026, where the commission was given the opportunity to review the plan and provide input and comments. The Resident Advisory Board, comprised of all residents on assisted housing, reviewed the annual plan and had the opportunity to provide input and comments at their meeting held on February 18, 2026. The PHA annual plan describes how the PHA operates and the services it provides. The plan is used to inform HUD, assisted families, and the public about the PHA's mission, goals, and priorities while outlining how the PHA serves low, very low, and extremely low-income households. I concur with the recommendation and respectfully request mayor and city council approval.
Thank you, Mike. We are on a public hearing to consider City Council approve the adoption of the Public Housing Authority Annual Plan for federal fiscal year 26. Do we have anyone here from the public to address us on this item? Seeing no one here virtually?
No input.
All right. And back to us for any discussion here. Any questions or discussion on this item? Seeing none? Hearing none. Motion is to receive and file and adopt the resolution. So Adrian, would you call the roll, please?
Kavanaugh.
Aye.
Resnick. Staver.
Aye.
Wethel.
Aye.
Roussel.
Aye.
Sprank.
Aye.
Liondecker.
Aye.
That motion passes 7-0.
Public hearing number 2 is conducting a public hearing for the Jules, Iowa Department of Transportation Consolidated Funding.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Sprank.
I motion that we receive and file and adopt the resolution.
Second by Wethel.
Motion by Sprank, second by Wethel. Mike, please.
Thank you. Director of Transportation Services Ryan Nucky is recommending City Council adopt the attached resolution approving the annual Jewel Consolidated Funding application to the Iowa Department of Transportation. This annual application requires that, along with other documents, a certificate of cost allocation plan and an authorizing resolution be submitted. The Jewel, as the public transit agency operated by the City of Dubuque, receives a portion of its annual operating funds from the Iowa Department of Transportation, Office of Public Transit, and/or the Federal Transit Administration. The timely submittal of the consolidated funding application is critical to ensuring the release of funds. The following funding revenue amounts are budgeted and will be received if the consolidated funding application and required documentation are submitted. The state operating allocation and 5310 funding is determined by combining annual fixed route and paratransit service ridership, revenue miles, and operating expenses, which is weighted along with locally generated revenue and financial support. The total population of each city or region is portioned as a percentage of Iowa's total population, which is weighted to a percentage of formula funding. The Jewel share of funding for fiscal year 27 is 1.729%. In fiscal year 2027, the Iowa Department of Transportation, Office of Public Transit, has projected the Jewel state operating allocation will be $341,921, and the Section 5310 formula allocation will be $100,499 for a projected total of $442,420 in fiscal year 27 allocated funding. The Jewel has vehicles eligible for replacement from statewide federal 5339 capital assistance for transit funds in fiscal year 27 for a total cost of $2,114,290. Approval will allow the Jewel to apply for bus replacements with assistance of 80% from state funding and 15% match to replace buses that are past their useful life per the DOT FTA guidelines. The Jewel has vehicles that qualify for this funding, but the funding is not guaranteed. I concur with the recommendation and respectfully request mayor and city council approval.
Thank you, Mike. We are in a public hearing to consider City Council adopt the attached resolution approving the annual Jewel Consolidated Funding application to the Iowa Department of Transportation. Do we have anyone here in chambers to address us on this item? Seeing no one here, anyone virtually?
No input.
Okay, back to us then for any discussion. Mr. Resnick.
Mr. Mayor, I don't know if Mr. Nucky is here. Oh, he is. Good, great. It seemed to me kind of a funding situation here where it's kind of confusing, and I see that we increase the ridership, so we increase our percentage of the share, and it goes, I guess it goes up and down compared with other communities in Iowa. How does this year compare with the last few years as far as a number?
Ryan Nucky, Director of Transportation Services. So this year's numbers are a little bit higher than last year's numbers. They all do fluctuate. The 5310 formula funding is higher, is quite a bit higher, about 10 to 15,000 higher, and the operating allocations of 341,000 is a little bit less than last year.
So what I'm reading here is that the good work that you're doing to to increase ridership actually is rewarded with this. And so, and how much, I mean, our ridership has been relatively constant the last few years, or I know that the situation with school riders changes sometimes, but where are we and as far as ridership in Dubuque? Is it up 5% or we're down 5%? Or what numbers were used for this?
We've seen consistent growth over the past 4 years of ridership. We did see the dip down when we had the COVID years.
Sure.
So when I came to the city, we were about 330,000 riders. And this year, when we do our budget presentation, it should be about 405,000 riders. So we've seen a constant growth. I believe this year to last year, you're going to see, I think it's about 12 to 15,000 increase in ridership. And I'll gladly go through that Thursday at our budget presentation.
Great. Thank you very much for the information. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Anybody else? Thanks for the preview, Ryan. Appreciate that. All right. Well, motion here is to receive and file and adopt the resolution. Adrian, would you call the roll, please?
Kavanaugh.
Aye.
Resnick.
Aye.
Staver.
Aye.
Wethel.
Aye.
Roussel.
Aye.
Sprank.
Aye.
Leyendecker.
Aye.
That motion passes 7-0.
Public hearing number 3 is petition to vacate a portion of West 6th Street right-of-way known as City Lot 61B in the city of Dubuque, Iowa for vacating petition.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Resnick.
I move to receive and file and adopt the resolution.
Second by Wethel.
Motion by Resnick, second by Wethel. Mike, please.
Thank you. City Engineer Gus Ahoyas is recommending City Council adopt the resolution for vacating of city interest in the street right-of-way property described as City Lot 61B. The city executed a development agreement with Gronin Development last year on March 17, 2025, for the development of a mixed-use building at the corner of 5th and Main Street. The project will provide 8,000 square feet of first-floor commercial space and at least 80 rental residential units at an investment of approximately $24 million. Since the execution of the development agreement, the Gronin team has worked with city staff and identified an additional small area of land, which we are referring to as the notch, that is required to square off the northeast corner of the property. In order for the city to convey that property, a first amendment to the development agreement is required. The amendment has been prepared in order to allow for the following: adding new land to the project, the notch, establishing easement areas and revocable and irrevocable license areas, imposing new infrastructure, utility, and permitting obligations, establishing required bonding, inspections, and platting procedures, creating mechanisms for early site access. Included in the licenses to be granted for private improvements on public right-of-way are 2 electric meter banks and 2 electric transformers, 1 meter bank and transformer on the north side of the building in the West 6th Street right-of-way, and 1 meter bank and transformer on the west side of the building in the alley right-of-way. For the First Amendment document, if the city requires relocation of the transformers or meter banks to accommodate a public improvement project, the city will assume the cost of the relocation. I concur with the recommendation and respectfully request Mayor and City Council approval.
Thank you, Mike. We are in a public hearing to consider City Council adopt the resolution for vacating of city interest in the street right-of-way property described as City Lot 61B. Do we have anyone here in chambers to address us on this item? Seeing nobody here, anyone virtually?
No input.
All right, back to us for any discussion. Seeing and hearing none. All right, motion here is to receive and file and adopt the resolution. Adrian, would you call the roll, please?
Kavanaugh.
Aye.
Resnick.
Aye.
Staver.
Aye.
Wethel.
Aye.
Roussel.
Aye.
Sprank.
Aye.
Leyendecker.
Going to abstain due to the bank's potential involvement in this project.
All right, that motion passes with 6 ayes and 1 abstention. Thank you.
We'll move on to public input. At this time, anyone participating in the meeting may address the City Council on the action items on the agenda or on matters under the control of the City Council. For all in-person attendees, please approach the podium and state your name and address when the mayor asks if there is any in-person input. For all remote attendees, please enter your name and address in the chat function or state your name and address over the phone when the mayor asks if there is any virtual input. If more than one participant would like to speak, then city staff will determine the speaking order of the participants. Individual remarks are limited to 5 minutes, and the overall public input period is limited to 30 minutes. Under the Iowa Open Meetings Law, the City Council can take no formal action on comments given during public input or that do not relate to the action items on the agenda.
All right, thank you, Adrian. Welcome, everybody. Do we have any public input this evening?
Good evening. Clark Slows, 2925 Burlington Street. Just have some observation and comments about the March 23rd meeting. Rob McDonald was here and made the comment that he wanted to see a 0% increase in the levy rate. That's different than seeing a 0% increase in the property taxes paid by the average homeowner. The figure of 2% was also used as a possibility. That's three different levy rates, 0%, 2%, and 3% for the average homeowner generates a different tax levy. We need to clarify that because even at a 0% increase in the average homeowner, overall property taxes collected grow by 3.8%. You use the $10.16 levy, it's 6.9%. If you use the 2%, it's about 5.7% in total taxes collected. We need to be careful on how we word this because the average person may say, you said 0%, on the levy. That levy has a consequence dealing with taxes collected. We seem to be fixated on the average homeowner because depending on the levy rate, if you use the 0% increase in property tax dollars to the average home, anybody that's under about 8.5% would pay potentially less taxes than they are in the current fiscal year. So there needs to be some clarification of that. If you're going to say 0% in taxes paid by the average homeowner, state what that levy rate, what's that levy rate? 0%, my quick calculation is 9.87. For 2%, it's pretty close to the $10.06 levy we already have. And some interesting thing, that was asked about the greenhouse. I emailed and asked, what property taxes go to the greenhouse? Just under $574,000 was the response I got. Now, if you eliminate that and you're still going to purchase flowers commercially, you're not saving all that $574,000. I think the parks people are putting something together to answer that question. What would be saved? What are the consequences? And one council member, if we go with the 2%, $305,000 that you'd have to cut, I took a shot at it, emailed the council person my results. I ended up cutting parks people, maintenance people, two of them. But, you started thinking, wasn't that a priority, a high priority? And it's kind of like, when I was going through that, my wife said to me, is the view pretty good from the cheap seats? And I'm going, yeah, it's pretty tough from when you're sitting on this side of the table, wanting to see property taxes reduced. But got to be realistic. The difference between, what the North Enders got charged for, their assessments versus some of the, how should we say, I'll call them average ones, which I think the city assessor said was 8.8 or 8.9%. That difference is too great to see everybody pay less taxes. Somebody's paying something, but a little more empathy for those of us who got a 17.5% raise in their assessments. And the last time, the previous one before that, I took a 16.5%. So, two over 15% raises in two assessment cycles. That's getting a little excessive. But, who determines, what those values are going up? It's when people sell their homes. I mean, all the assessor is doing is following the law to try and get what are those actual sales, what are we paying? That's all I got.
All right, thank you, Clark, for your comments.
Good evening. I'm Andy Butler, live on Mount Carmel Road. I'm here tonight on behalf of Dubuque Forward. I'm one of four founders. My wife Debbie is here with me also. I'd like to speak real briefly about item 3 on the action agenda, lighting of the Town Clock Plaza. There have been a number of people over the years who have thought that it would be really important to go light the town clock It's emblematic of the city. It's distinct. In a survey done by David Gamble late last year, the clear majority of people thought that the town clock was the center of the city, so it's really important that we are lighting that up. I want to make a few comments that may or may not come out later, and if you have any questions during the vote, please feel free to ask them. The lighting we're using is going to be called dynamic white lighting, which means that it will be able to be controllable by way of temperatures, so really cold or really hot. And we can also light the intensity. And what we're trying to do is create a warm light for the town clock that actually will dim as the night goes on and then get a little brighter during the daytime. So it won't be bright all the time. We're going to put a lot of thought into what it looks like, because what we want to do is accent the architectural features of the clock and the history of the clock. It's really a pretty exciting project. We've got so many things going on downtown. It seems great to go bring more attention to that particular architectural element and component of the history for Dubuque. I can tell you, every time I drive home from Wisconsin after dark, I know where the clock is and I can't see it. So it's a matter of pride to me to bring that back to Dubuque so that everybody can see that clock and know where it is and what it stands for. And there have been a number of people who've worked diligently to get this done and accomplished. I'd like to thank the city manager for mustering all the staff to get some very quick meetings together to understand what the issues are from a city standpoint so that we can get this thing funded, we can get the material ordered, and we can actually get the installation done and completed by July 4th. We picked that date for really two reasons. Number one, it's obviously the 250th anniversary of our country. That's a really neat thing. And then somebody last week said it's also the 150th anniversary of the Great Flood in Rockdale. So to be able to do something and have a ceremony in recognition of the people who lost their lives during that tragic event also is just another poignant moment for encouraging and moving things along very quickly. So those are really all the comments I have. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Andy, for your comments.
Good evening. Catherine Sorensen, 2613 Jackson. All of you sit here, you were elected to office, and we have to put our utmost faith in trusting you to make judgment calls and to right things. And I'm having some doubts. So I'll let you know what I found and what I'm looking at, and maybe somebody can someday explain it to me. You wanted a $2.3 million property tax increase. Last time I told you you had an option. So the difference between your revenues and your expenses, based on what I found on the website, is $1,090,000. That's taken the 416.53 minus it from your expenses of 525.31. You come up short only $1 million, $1,090,000. I found two budgets. And I'm really, really, really confused. If you go in under operating budget and you pull up a department, at the top of the page, it shows you approved budget. And then you can see the actual budget. This is my question. Public Works approved budget was $32.12 million. They've only roughly spent so far this year $20 million. Where's the $12 million? Water had their approved budget at $30.11 million. They've only spent approximately $10 million. Housing, 24.31. They've only probably spent about $12 million, give or take a couple million here and there because we're not done with fiscal year. Airport was at 34.73, and at that point I basically just gave up knowing that they spent less than $20 million. It says approved budget versus actual, which means you approved a budget last year for Public Works at $32.12 million. They're only spending $20 million. Where's the other $12 million? I actually gave up after I got done with police, who went under, engineering, who's way under, and a few other departments. I'm exhausted. just trying to figure out how do we have two different budgets? A budget that was approved, a budget that was actual, and we're off by millions of dollars. We're not talking thousands. We're not even talking a million. We're talking millions of dollars. And you want a property tax increase. Water is under, but you want to raise our rates. Where is the money that was approved in these budgets? Because it's not being spent, and that's obvious. One more thing, just so you guys may understand this a little bit more, because I went a little bit fishing. The current bond obligation between the city and the TIFs totals $287 million. $99 million comes out of your TIF fund, which currently only has a balance of about a little over $28 million. I'm not giving you final dollars and cents. It's a waste of time at this point. But your revenue coming in is $19 million a year. A little bit over $3 million of that is contributed by the school district into your TIF fund. So your working cash balance right now is about $28 million, but you're paying out a close to $8 million, a little bit over $8 million in bond issues in your TIF fund. Your actual bond that you have with the city, after we get done with that, is $187,206,614. You are paying close to $16 million a year in the city's bond issues. So you are paying, your bond issues are costing you $24 million a year. Let's round it up to 25. Your debt obligation is way through the roof. And I understand you're trying to do economic development, and I understand everything else. But you might be able to pay off some of these bond issues if you can tell me where the missing money is in the approved budget amounts that we never spent this year. Have a good night.
Thank you, Catherine, for your comments.
Good evening. I'm Brooklyn Williams, 250 West 6th Street, apartment 501. We're Dubuque, Iowa. Masterpiece on Mississippi, we call ourselves. And we are. And we have some amazing new facets and gems that we're putting in. We have some growing pains we're doing. But in those growing pains, I ask, please, let's not forget what makes us a masterpiece. Our arts, our hospitality, our genuine love as a community. Let's not lose that during the growing pains. That's all I have to say.
All right. Thank you, Brooklyn, for your comments. Anybody else this evening? Please.
Yeah, Leonard Dress, 541 Groveland. I've been hearing on the radio today now, okay, the last meeting I was here, we said, hey, no, there was 3 no's to the 3%. And then now we're going to raise water rates, sewer rates, the garbage. We're going to raise a rate for the stormwater, which should have been paid off in 2015 from, as I always say, the first meeting I sat in on before the city took my house. And we were told, Gus, Darren, Jolene, Richard, that, hey, in 10 years, this is going to be paid off. Now, my concern is with these here raises on this here stuff, there's people in the north end that bought houses because of the affordable housing. And I know some of them personally, and they worked, 30 years at jobs paying less than $10 an hour to say, hey, I own a house in the city of Dubuque. But if this keeps going on, how much longer will they be able to have their pride for owning that house? Because, they're on Social Security. And, you get Social Security raised and then your Medicare goes up. So, I know how that system works now. I remember my mom used to complain to me all the time about that when I was still working. But that's my big concern. People ask me, they say, Lenny, why do you worry about other people's stuff? Well, through my years of employment, I was union steward, on shop committees, shop chairman, and I guess that's why I am the way I am now, worried about where are we going to slow this down, and we're talking a big increase on all the property on the north end. Let's face it, people that, bought their homes on making $8 an hour, their Social Security ain't that great either. So that's all I got to say. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you, Leonard, for your comments.
Practice driving
Corey's got there's a button on there too. Corey's going to press it for you. Get the mic a little closer for you.
Thank you. That's good. My name is Roger Arnsdorf. I live at 3935 Creston Street, and I was more or less looking for a little clarification on property taxes, and I thought that they were talking about raising the assessed value, which would, of course, raise the amount of property tax that each person pays, each city, each business pays. And then I heard another comment, and I want to make sure it's right, is that the percentage would raise. Like, as an example, let's say 1.5%, that the percentage a person pays. My question is, with modern technology, all the businesses are always trying to streamline, get more bang for your buck. And if I'm wrong on the percentage that each person pays in income tax, is your percentage of your groceries going up? Is the percentage of your income going up? Probably not that much. But I guess me personally, I don't want to see the percentages go up for whatever it might be. Percentage towards sewer, percentage towards garbage. The percentages should stay the same, because as inflation goes, that should make the same percentage, if I'm making my point. We shouldn't pay a larger percentage of our income in property tax for garbage, sewer, whatever. It should stay the same percentage. Our people here should be trying to be more efficient. Computers and the like, that's my question and my point. Same percentage is fine, but I want more bang for my buck. Thank you.
Thank you, Roger, for your comments. Anybody else this evening? Okay, nobody else here. Anybody virtually? Thank you, Corey.
No input.
Thank you, Adrian. Okay. Thanks, everybody. We can move on to action items.
Action item number 1 is 2026 Public Works Asphalt Overlay Program Sidewalk Curb Ramp Project Bid Package 3 Award Public Improvement Contract.
Mr. Mayor,
Ms. Russell.
I move to receive and file and adopt the resolution.
Second by Wethel.
Got a motion by Russell, second by Wethel. Mike, please.
Thank you. Assistant City Engineer Bob Schissel is recommending City Council award the public improvement construction contract for the 2026 Public Works Asphalt Overlay Program Sidewalk Curb Ramp Project Bid Package 3 to Midwest Concrete in the amount of $264,271 through adoption of the attached resolution. The 2026 Public Works Asphalt Overlay Program Sidewalk Curb Ramp Project Bid Package 3 will provide for the replacement of 45 access curb ramps, adjacent street pavement work, curb and gutter replacement, sidewalks, one storm sewer intake, and landscape restoration work. This project is in coordination with the Public Works Asphalt Overlay Program at the following locations. 28th Street from Jackson Street to Washington Street, there's 6 ramps. 29th Street from Jackson Street to Washington Street, there's 8 ramps. 30th Street and Jackson Street, there's 3 ramps. Diagonal Street and Trout Terrace, there's 2 ramps. Broadway Street from 24th Street to 28th Street, there's 12 ramps. Fulton Street and Monroe Street, there's 3 ramps. Argyle Street from Ghost Street to Groveland Place, 5 ramps. And Windsor Avenue from Ghost Street to Euclid Street, there's 6 ramps. I concur with the recommendation and respectfully request mayor and city council approval.
Thank you, Mike. What discussion or questions do we have on this item? Seeing none and hearing none here.
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, Mr. President.
Just quickly, so Mr. Van Milligan, everybody going through Dubuque noticed that we're constructing things. Here we are in April, and this is when it all begins. It's really exciting because there's a lot of work to do. The funding, is this all the roads? Does it all come out of the same pot as funding of new roads?
So this is part of the Public Works program where the Public Works Department does 10 miles of streets every year at the direction of the City Council being one of your top priorities. And so we bid out the accessory work like the building of the curb ramps, the handicap curb ramps. As far as the funding source, I'm going to ask Jennifer Larson if she could identify the funding source on this contract.
Good evening, Jennifer Larson, Chief Financial Officer. The 10-mile asphalt overlay program is funded by a combination of road use tax funds, depending if there's funding available, and then what we call street construction funds, which is taking our 1% local option sales tax. 30% of that goes to street projects, and that is what funds the asphalt overlay program.
I see. So those are the sources. Thank you very
Yes.
much. And Mr. Van Milligan, I remember when these first the ramps became part of this whole project. And you were saying that we're going to have to really reduce some of our mileage because of these. And it looks like we're able to do the ramps plus 10 miles.
Yeah, so what happened, and this was, I'm trying to think, probably about 10 years ago, the Federal American with Disabilities Act said that at curb cuts, we had to put in a handicap ramp. So we used to do that work ourselves. But then there was some kind of decision, I think it was on some kind of national lawsuit, had nothing to do with us, where they said that wasn't good enough. You actually had to have engineered curb ramps, so where you actually do engineer design drawings to make sure the ramp met all the requirements, as opposed to having just someone pour a concrete ramp and doing their best to make sure that it met the requirements. And so when they did that, that substantially increased the cost of us doing these curb ramps. And so at that time, to cover the cost, we reduced the program from 10 miles a year to 5 miles. And so the mayor and city council prioritized that they wanted to get back to 10 miles. So it still cost us all the extra money. It's just that it gets allocated from doing other projects to doing this 10 miles of street program. So we've been able to now pretty much every year do the 10 miles.
Great. And I mentioned how things are ramping up around here, no pun intended. But what I saw is that some of the ramps were being worked on again, too. So obviously things fall apart after 10 years and need to be fixed up. Does the replacement also need to be continue to be checked off and by engineering, or can we just replace what's there without additional engineering costs?
It's my understanding that we were required to engineer every ramp now to
Even
meet the federal
replacements?
requirements.
Even replacements of engineered ramps?
And I believe so, unless somebody wants to correct me. Gus Sahoya's city engineer is here.
I was hoping that eventually that cost would be done with the extra engineering costs, that we could just replace this fantastic ramp. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Gus Sohoya, City Engineer. So when we get a new program like this, we have to look at every ramp. And even though we have a ramp, if they're not compliant, we have to redesign it and reconstruct it. So most ramps that are over 10 years old aren't compliant anymore. So we redesign it and reconstruct the ramp, even though there was a ramp there now.
So you know the engineered ramps, and you know where they are, and you can just replace them.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. They all have
And
to
they
be
change the standards probably about every 10 years on us, so we have to keep on looking at those standards and make sure that they're compliant.
Great. Well, thank you for that detail. I just noticed there's a lot happening, so it's great. Things are going to be improved infrastructure. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, Mr. Sprank.
Can I ask Gus another question?
Hey, Gus, don't run away yet.
Hey,
Mr.
Gus.
Sprank has a question for you.
With that being said, with saying that they rechanged the ADA changes how the ramps are designed, could you give us an example of ramps that a completed ramp that would match what's going to happen? Because most of these are going to be taking place in the north end.
So yeah, there's many of them. I can't tell you all the locations, but like there's some on JFK near, I can't recall the streets, but anything that you see, when we make a transition, sometimes the transition's required to get the percentages right. So we'll make a transition where you see the old ramps, we just cut into the intersection, and now the new ramps, we might go 20 feet away from the intersection to make the transitions grades work out. So you can see, it's pretty evident that we've been in there and we've taken a big SWAT.
Okay. The reason I asked is because of like this, the ones on Central, because those ramps come out so far, and some folks, I'm hoping that's not the continuing standard that we have to complete with, because those are older ramps.
Some of those ramps on Central did go quite a ways.
Yes.
And they are compliant.
Okay.
So.
Thank you.
So, Gus, am I understanding something correctly? Just because I think this fits into this entire budget conversation we're having. Did I hear you correctly that we are required by the federal government to engineer these ramps appropriately and then place these ramps at places? Is that correct?
Absolutely.
We're required to do that, which I don't think anybody's disagreeing with. I think it's a useful requirement. Everybody, I would hope, agrees with the Americans with Disabilities Act and being able to do that. But does the federal government pay us to do that?
No.
We don't get any. Jennifer Larson is
yeah.
shaking her head. No, we get $0 from the federal government really to be able to create ramps or do the asphalt overlays or things like that. Okay, we're required to do it, but we get no money to do it. We do get some money from the state of Iowa through the road use tax fund, right? That's divvied up to cities throughout, and is that divvied up by county essentially, or is it divvied up by city? It's county. It goes to county. So it gets divvied up to counties and then gets divvied up to cities in that way. So we do get some money from the state of Iowa to do this, but otherwise we have to budget for what some people might call an unfunded mandate to do something that people agree with. We should have ramps for people to be able to access every sidewalk in town. We want to do that. But we don't get any money to do, we're mandated to do it and get $0 to do it. Okay.
And it's almost $1 million a year, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be probably over $1 million for this program. There's 4 phases of it, or 4 stages, but it'll be over $1 million this year.
Okay.
And if I may,
please,
one thing to point out, there can be severe consequences for failing to comply with the ADA as a Title II covered entity, which is what we are. The most recent one that I'm familiar with in Iowa was from 2015 or 2016. It involved the city of Cedar Rapids, and there was a consent decree done where they had not kept up with the curb ramps, and I think their agreement was upwards over $40 million to address the non-compliant curb access over time and the delay in keeping up with it.
Yeah, thank you, Karen. I want to be really clear. I'm not suggesting that we ever don't comply with the Americans with Disabilities Act. I'm just suggesting that we aren't paid to do so by the federal government. We're just forced to do so. And we have to come up with the money as a community to be able to do that.
I know a couple cases where they do come in and check the ramps to make sure they're compliant, and they are really picky. I mean, you can't be off even a 1/10%.
Yep.
there.
Well, I'm glad we do such good work. I would hope that we do that good work.
It's critical that you
Yeah.
have the percentages just perfect. If
Yeah.
0.1%, you have to redo it.
Sure. Mr. Saber, go ahead.
Is it also true that if you fix one ramp in an intersection, you have to fix every ramp in that intersection that's not
Typically,
compliant?
that's the case. If you improve the rideability of the intersection, you have to improve all the ramps. And they're expensive.
Right. Any other questions before Gus tries to run away again?
I'll be here tomorrow night. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, right. We know where you'll be tomorrow night, Gus. We have a solid idea of that. All right. Thank you very much, Gus. We appreciate it. All right. Well, motion here is to receive and file and adopt this resolution. Adrian, would you call the roll, please?
Kavanaugh.
Aye.
Resnick.
Aye.
Staver.
Aye.
Wethel.
Aye.
Roussel.
Aye.
Sprank.
Aye.
Leindecker.
Aye.
That motion passes 7-0.
Action item number 2 is RFP Comprehensive Fire Station Location and Facility Study Recommendation.
Mr. Mayor,
Ms. Wethel.
I move to receive and file and approve.
Second by Sprang.
Motion by Wethel, second by Sprank. Mike, please.
Thank you. Fire Chief Amy Scheller is recommending City Council approval to move forward with Wendell 5 Bugles Design in partnership with the Mitchell Associates Architects to complete the fire department's fire station location and facility study for $97,500. This study will provide a data-driven framework to guide long-term capital planning, facility investment, station location, and service delivery improvements. I concur with the recommendation and respectfully request Mayor and City Council approval.
Thank you, Mike. Chief Scheller, I see you sitting there. I do have a question for you right off the bat, if you wouldn't mind. We might have a few more. So, thank you. I'm looking at the timeline on your memo that you wrote. Is it still pretty much the same? You were a little off of it. We're a couple months behind here in getting to this point, but it sounds like you went through a pretty rigorous process of being able to find the consultant that you want to work with. Does it keep us on the general timeline of being able to come back to us and present in around September?
Yeah, Mayor Amy Scheller, Fire Chief, yes, absolutely. We're about 30 days behind, but I think we can make up some of that time, or we'll report back if it continues to escalate.
Okay, great. Thank you. That was my main question for you. But anybody else have?
Mr. Mayor?
Mr. Resnick.
Just quickly, and 5 Bugles, were they the, I know there's a lot of things that go into the selection. Were they one of the lowest as far as cost as well? Do you know? I don't see any rankings of cost, but I know that there's a whole lot more that goes into it than simply cost.
Absolutely. So we evaluated the proposers before we looked at the cost, but the cost, was an important piece. When we came for the request to move forward with the RFP, we put a value on it. We didn't want it to exceed $120,000, and we're excited that we maintain that.
So, you didn't mention the prices and things in here. Were they all similar, or were there great changes? And they were all probably under 120?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So you selected the best one, the absolute best one, and we have the budget for it, so let's go with it.
Correct.
I see. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, Mr. Stamer.
Hey, has there been a study like this done in the recent times, or when's the last study similar to this?
Yeah, great question. About 20 years ago, they did a matrix study. Some things have changed since then, and then recently the department partnered with an analytical software that helped with the study. It was really forward-thinking technology that allowed us to place stations on the map and remove stations and see what the recommendations were. They pulled all of our data. We use it for accreditation, so it's twofold. But the recommendation that came from that analysis was that we work on our times. Before we could propose.
Say that again?
That we work on our times, so that we work on our call handling, our turnout. You can't do much about travel time, but what we learned from that study with all that data was we need to focus our efforts and partner with our dispatch center to make improvements, in which we did. So phenomenal improvements by the dispatch center improved our performance almost by 10%. So we're positioned perfectly to move into this study. And it partners with the condition assessment of all 6 stations. So the thing that I've learned the most is you need to be efficient when you're moving forward with improving those stations. And I was working one project at a time, and it was taking a little bit longer. I'm learning a lot. I'm partnering with some other departments, and we're moving quicker, but why not get everything together, get all the recommendations, get them prioritized, and combine it with that station location study? It's exciting. It's a big RFP.
So the other study was to assess the conditions of those fire stations.
At the, yeah.
So
At
it
the
would
same
make
time.
sense not to improve stations if you're going to eliminate.
Correct, yeah. If we invested a lot of money in one of the stations that the study says you should relocate it, that wouldn't be good.
And so the other, you said you were working some sort of software where you could move them around, and through that process, did you come up with a plan in your head that you thought would work?
Yeah, I have some ideas based off of that software and recalculating some of the response times and the location.
And probably call volume from certain areas?
Correct.
So what do you hope this study will bring to the table that you don't feel like you already have?
It's confirmation. These are the experts. They know what they're doing. They know land. I don't know planning. I don't know land. We've got great partnership with those departments, but it brings everything together, and it'll conclude this conversation. And in my opinion, I think we'll know whether we need to move a station, whether we need to relocate 2 stations, whether we need to build a station. The study could recommend that we reduce a station. I don't think that's the case. And when you ask if I have some ideas, I do. Mm-hmm. It's all based off of the data as well. Where are our call volumes? What are our response times to those areas? Where's our growth? What's the potential? And then, honestly, I'd love to leave a legacy of what the future 10, 20, 30 years for the city of Dubuque is, so it's a playbook the next chief coming in can execute or communicate with.
Have you utilized AI in putting some of this information in and seeing what it spits out?
We have used AI in many aspects in the fire department. We are very curious in that space, but we're cautious and careful. The software firm that we've partnered with is very advanced. It's pretty impressive software to be able to plug in what our data is, what our call volume is, what our response times are in performance in each district, then remove a station and see what happens. What percentage do we change? And some of our estimates and guesses are moved slightly by small little improvements. Mm-hmm. So the model could predict building a station or predict relocating a station. And we're just excited to get that partnership with the individuals who do this more regularly, understand all the components, like I said, with land availability and performance.
Thank you.
Ms. Wetzel.
So a couple things. One is that just to verify for everybody at home who's not maybe reading your memo, which is very helpful, this is looking at multiple things. This is looking at assessing each of our current houses, the status of those houses as far as if we would need to repair, replace, the cost of each of those projects will be included. Is that correct?
Correct. That is correct.
And then, so it will assess each individual firehouse based on current capacity and how many firefighters are working at each house, or with our expanded numbers, will it reassess that based on our hope to expand our fire force?
It will.
For occupancy, good.
Absolutely.
And then it also will look at current data and projected data of fire calls, response times, and if we need to build out another station at a certain place because there are certain call times that are longer and certain places that are, I don't want to say overserved, but maybe would have just as good of a response time based on another house in the vicinity, and that we want to allocate our resources where they can do the most good. And so this is so multifaceted, and I appreciate that we're coming to this point finally where we're going to get more information. But I want to make sure that when it comes back to council that we have a cost assessment affiliated with each of these decision-making pieces, because I don't want to come up short when we invest this kind of money. I want to make sure that we have all the information we need. So I'm glad to hear that cost assessment and evaluation will be pieces of this that are going to be crystal clear for us. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr.
Mr. Sprank.
I'm really, Chief, I'm really impressed with the fact that we're looking at all the issues with our fire stations and such, but what I'm really going to be looking at more is the identification of service gaps and future systems needs. Because as you mentioned, our last study was 20 years ago. I'm sure we've had a lot of systems needs changes since then, so I'm going to be intrigued to know what potential things the industry professionals are saying, like these will be the next process in fire resistance and EMS that we need to be looking into. So I appreciate that you're looking also into the future as well, to the best you can. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anyone else? All right. Well, Chief, thank you very much for the time. Appreciate that. Okay. Well, the motion here is to receive and file and approve this. So Adrian, would you call the roll, please?
Kavanaugh.
Aye.
Resnick.
Aye.
Staver.
Aye.
Wethel.
Aye.
Roussel.
Aye.
Sprank.
Aye.
Leyendecker.
Aye.
That motion passes 7-0.
Action item number 3 is support of a town clock lighting partnership with Dubuque Forward.
Mr. Mayor,
Ms. Roussel.
I move to receive and file and approve.
Second.
Second.
Motion by Roussel and a second by Wethel. Mike, please.
Thank you. Andy Butler of Dubuque Ford has approached the city with a concept to light the town clock. This would be through funding and efforts led by Dubuque Ford, with the city being the recipient of the proposed improvements. Park and Recreation Director Matt Kelsevich advises, and I quote, that after several meetings and discussions of Dubuque Ford and city staff, which included a lighting designer and potential contracting partner, the city expanded conversations to include multiple departments to review the concept. The feedback about this concept has been positive. However, several areas of concern need to be evaluated, including the provision of power, sensitivity with installation, availability of replacement parts, light pollution, and the warranty, close quotes. It is anticipated that these can be quickly resolved. A vote of support by the City Council would allow work on the project to proceed in relation to a timeline requested by Dubuque Ford to possibly have the project ready to be fully activated by July 4th, 2026. While any delay would miss the July 4th target date, the project could proceed at a slower pace. Assistant City Planner Chris Happ Olson advises, and I quote, when time is allowed, we would take something as visually prominent as this to our Historic Preservation Commission for an advisory review, as it is on a city structure and a visible icon from the downtown and Bluff neighborhoods. Although the structure is in no formal district that would trigger this type of historic review, the timing to go to City Council by April 6th doesn't support such a review, as the commission already met in March. She goes on to say, in my opinion, whether this structure is considered to be National Register eligible would be debatable. Erring on the side of caution, when I review this, the nature of the work proposed does not appear to visually change the physical structure other than its visibility at night. When combined with the proposed modification's reversibility, the change appears to have negligible impact on that resource. She goes on to say, based on this, I feel that staff review with no adverse effect on a potentially historic structure is sufficient. Consistent with the proposal from Dubuque Ford would be responsible for all implementation expenses and would purchase spare replacement parts for city inventory. The city would then be responsible for all maintenance and electrical expenses. The maintenance and electrical expenses are anticipated to be minimal for the foreseeable future. I respectfully recommend Mayor and City Council authorization to proceed with this project and authorization to sign the final agreement that will be completed soon, consistent with the described understanding, so the project can be completed by July 4th, 2026.
All right, thank you, Mike. Yeah, Mr. Sprank.
Yeah, thank you. Not against this. I think it'd look really nice downtown. I was a little intrigued when Mr. Butler mentioned about the light system being dynamic temperature lighting. Can somebody explain that a little bit more? Because I've never heard of that. So maybe the architect? Yeah.
You guys can you hear me?
Yep.
Mike Stickley. I'm an architect here in Dubuque and also a member of Dubuque Forward. So I've been pretty involved with Andy Butler and the whole team on the designing of this, the lighting system. So to answer your question, Danny, it's basically all white light, but it can be tuned. So the structure is mostly white. Sometimes if you specify a 25, I'm getting a little technical, but the Kelvin rating is the whiteness or the softness. So this allows us to tune it and to get the right quality of light on it. If a fixture were to go out in say 5 to 10 years, it also lets that new fixture go in really subtly. If you got a brand new fixture and you can't tune them, it sticks out like a sore thumb. So the light tuning is the best, we feel like the best option. We did discuss RGB or colors. We diverted away from that. We thought that could potentially set a whole nother trend of all of a sudden lighting color on everything downtown. So we try to be very sensitive to future precedents and just kind of what that overall aesthetic is for the historic structure.
That answers my question. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, Ms. Rousseau.
I was wondering if maybe you could give us some insight on what kind of maintenance might be needed on a project like that.
Yeah, so this installation is really similar to Steeple Square. So I was involved in that about 8 to 10 years ago. It's actually the same lighting vendor, the same lighting manufacturer. So we do have a tried and true installation in Dubuque. Maintenance, it should be pretty minimal. Typically what goes out are the drivers. So that's kind of the big power device that lights the lights themselves. That'll be remote located on the inside of the structure. That's 9 times out of 10 what goes wrong first. So if that does happen, it's pretty easy to get access inside the structure, swap that out. Dubuque Forward will provide attic stock, so that'll be an inventory to replace, and it's a pretty painless exercise. Typically the fixtures themselves don't totally fail. You might have a few LED lights that go out, so it's typically not total fixture failure. So that's most of it.
Thank you. Thank you. I would just like to add that it's kind of unusual when you get a project that comes to you that's all ready to go and we just get the benefit of it. And all the work has been done to make this great project ready for us to take over. So thank you for everyone for your leadership on this really interesting way to light our downtown.
So we did have electrician look at operational costs. It's less than $300 a year to light this for just the power. It's really minimal. So that's always a question. And what's the energy? So it's minimal.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Mr. Rissick.
I'm glad you mentioned the Steeple Square because that's just impressive. And I mean, it's very respectful of the design and it shows it at its best. Magnificent. So I'm conducting a concert on July 16th this year. So I looked back into history and what's happening in Dubuque on July 16th. So in 1970, the Your Town Clock Committee was formed. So I've been kind of looking at this earlier. And it just reminds me that people long before us were concerned about the town clock and preservation and coming together as citizens of Dubuque, as Dubuque Forward has done, to say this is an important part of our of what we do here, a part of our history, part of our community area. And I think this is a great idea. There's just something about light that when it's done right, like it has been done on Steeple Square, is just remarkable, inspiring. So I'm looking forward to doing this, and hopefully everything goes smoothly from here. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions for Mike, or can we let him sit down? It's very nice of him to stand there. All right, thank you very much, Mike. We appreciate the information. All right, any other questions?
I would just like to add on, I think it's great. I think it's, I think what David said's perfect. Light is, used like an artistic medium. It's beautiful, and you can tell a lot of thought was put into it, and the renderings, the tuning of the light is is wonderful. I think it's such a great gift. Thank you.
So I have a question on the city side of things. Is it Parks and Rec that is in charge of this once it's installed? So Matt, I have a question for you then, if you wouldn't mind. And then I'll come back to the general idea of it. So we kind of heard about, it's very generous. I very much appreciate what Dubuque Forward is offering to be able to provide some, the installation, the cost, but then also some extra parts if things go wrong and some expertise in the future on how to deal with it. Are we confident that we know how to deal with this once it's installed? This is a little different than what we normally do. Usually we're the ones in charge of a project from beginning to end in a city, on city property, and then we know all the, pieces of things, sort of like when you watch them install something in your house and you make sure you're watching so you know how they do it, so you know how to fix it when it breaks. Are we confident about that?
Good evening, Mayor, members of the City Council, Matt Kalsovich, Parks and Recreation Director. Yes, Mr. Mayor, to your point, so when we were first approached about the project, we took information back to our team. Again, we're already responsible for the management of the clock function itself, and we actually work with a local vendor to help provide service when that is an issue. So took the information here and assessed that with our group, and there's a lot of familiarity with the type of lighting that this will be and what we know how to handle already, and we do have access to potential vendors in the area as well if we needed advanced expertise, but we're confident in our ability to be able to support the system.
Great. All right, that's really the answer I was looking for. I was hoping that would be the case, and I felt that way too. And it also is. It's such a simple project. I need to figure out how to power my house for less than $300 a year. That's incredible. So that's it's a really good cost. So I appreciate that very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
So and you're confident too, Matt, that from a standpoint of personnel knowing how to deal with this and all those things, we'll have contractors, but then we'll also have the internal expertise.
Yeah, absolutely. And to your point about being involved in the process, we'll be there as the installation is happening, and we've already been in touch with some of the technical aspects of things to ensure that we're getting the knowledge we need to during the installation on top of what we're already comfortable with.
Great. Thank you. Appreciate that. I have two main points I want to make about this. First of all, I'll talk about just the lighting part of it. I love this idea so much. And I've loved it from the moment that Nelson Clavitter approached me in his office, which is actually Jitter's coffee shop. And I call it Nelson's office because that's where you find Nelson most of the time. And he approached me with this idea and said, hey, I want to light the town clock. And, he'd been talking to everybody about it. So it wasn't just me. He was just talking to everybody. So Nelson, thank you for really being the one to sort of like keep pushing this idea. And thanks to Dubuque Forward for taking it and then running with it in this way. It's such a thoughtful process that you've gone through here to be able to do this. And if it was up to me, if we've, it's fun to dream about things when you have like endless supplies of resources to be able to do stuff. I'd put lights everywhere all over this town because Andy, you said something during your comments that when you're driving across the Wisconsin Bridge and you see the town clock and you can't see it, it's dark. One of my favorite things to do when I was living outside of town, I lived in St. Louis for about 7 years before I moved back to Dubuque. And my wife and I would argue about which way we're going to drive into town coming from the south. And I always wanted to go around the curve coming in downtown so you can see downtown. Just that beautiful view that we get at night of the downtown just opening up for everybody. And I love that so much about the place we live. And Mike, you mentioned this, this idea of making sure that we set a precedent for historic structures and how we're going to do this tastefully. And I really appreciate that approach because I do want to see us in the future someday have some of those colorful lights in certain places, like maybe on bridges or whatnot, but then also having, lights like this in historic structures that work in this way. It's just such a great idea. I'm really looking forward to moving forward with it. So I want to say thank you for that. And thank you to the city staff for being at the table to work with this. The second point I want to make is we've learned a little bit about this process. I think we're figuring out how we can do this, where you have a city government working with an organization like Dubuque Forward to make sure that all the steps are being followed along the way to make this work for everybody. There's just certain ways that governments have to do things. We talked a little bit about rules that we have to follow from different levels of government earlier tonight. And sometimes we have to follow those rules in a certain way. And, we had some experimentation in doing that with some other projects. And I know at this one, it seems like we've really started to figure out, okay, we got a process here that is helping us to move forward. And I think that process is going to be important and also improved as we go into the future. So thank you to everybody for being involved in this. And I'm really looking forward to being able to see the town clock lit up on July 4th and beyond this year. Hopefully we can make that deadline. I think it's a really good idea. All right. Well, we have a motion here to receive and file and approve this. So Adrian, would you call the roll, please?
Kavanaugh.
Aye.
Resnick.
Aye.
Staver.
Aye.
Wethel.
Aye.
Roussel.
Aye.
Sprank.
Aye.
Liondecker.
Aye.
That motion passes 7-0.
Action item number 4 is Jeffrey's Challenge Grant, Eagle Point Park.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Sprank.
I motion that we receive and file and approve.
Second by Wethel.
Motion by Sprank, second by Wethel. Mike, please.
Thank you. Planning Services Director Wally Werneman and Parks and Recreation Director Matt Kalsovich recommending City Council approval to inform the Jeffers Family Foundation of the city's intent to apply for a capital campaign challenge grant. This grant would support the restoration campaign for the Alfred Caldwell Design buildings in Eagle Point Park, a collaborative effort between the Parks and Recreation and Planning Services Departments. I concur with the recommendation and respectfully request Mayor and City Council approval.
Thank you, Mike. Questions or discussion? Mr. Resnick for a second.
Mr. Mayor, thank you very much. Could we get Mr. Kalsovich up here again to talk about, to let the people know about this, the residents? What are the possibilities here with this campaign challenge grant?
Matt Kalsovich, Parks and Recreation Director. Thank you for the chance to share about this. I'd actually call up my colleagues from planning to talk a little bit more about this. They're even a little more versed than me. As Mike mentioned, the partnership to really try and take advantage of the opportunity here with the grant program to do the work, especially in relation to the historic structures, is a very valuable opportunity that we do want to look into and take advantage of if we can here. So I'd actually maybe invite Wally up first to give more of a background, and perhaps Chris will be part of complementing that.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council members. Wally Wernmont, Planning Services Director. So, historic preservation is an activity under the Planning Services Department, and Chris Happ-Olson is our historic preservation planner for the city. So, she's dedicated a lot of times working on this project. As we came before the City Council, a budget session ago and there was a lot of concerns about the conditions of Eagle Point Park and the improvements that are associated with it. So, one of the things that were identified in there was a structural analysis of some of the buildings that are located up there, and the Parks and Rec Department had a CIP to be able to take some funding to be able to do that analysis. When we worked with them, and as Matt Kalsovich said, Marie Ware pulled us in because Matt wasn't here at the time. So, but we love working with the Parks Department. That's what we do. Like we mentioned, Planning Department gets our fingers in everyone's business in some way or another with regards to these projects. So, as we work with the project and take advantage of it, we were able to apply for a Jeffords grant for that historical structures report. We took $75,000 and turned it into $125,000. And we went through the City Council for that review and approval. We have a presentation. You guys were able to look at the historic structures report. Out of that report, it's identified, almost up to $2 million of repair work that needs to be done to the buildings, whether it's restoration, rehabilitation. And as part of that grant, Jeffers came to us and said, hey, we have this challenge grant. It's interesting that you don't really apply to the Jeffers grants. They solicit projects. So they identified that we did a historic structures report. They're very interested in helping the city fulfill the rehabilitation of these structures. So they're encouraging us to apply for this Jeffers Challenge Grant, which is the city has to raise $2 for every dollar that they receive. So in this case, I have the numbers provided here, about $600,000 up to, for a match. For what we have to raise up to 1.9 for that $600 and some $1,000 with regards to the project. So, in addition to that, we came before you to say, okay, we don't do city fundraising, right? We're not fundraisers of the city, so how do we go about doing this? So we came to you with an RFP. We went out and we solicited 3 proposals with regards to consultants, and it was a request for qualifications. Because we're just seeing, we have to be able to report back to Jeffers and basically say, we have a qualified fundraising applicant that's willing to work with us as part of this notice of intent to be able to move forward and say, hey, we're interested. Yes, we would like to participate in this challenge grant. And that's a lot of the reporting mechanisms we need to be able to provide. In addition to that historical structures report, kind of that budget that's being provided, timeline information. So that's the request before you tonight, is just to say, hey, you know what, planning and Parks and Rec, we really want you to move forward on this and put that notice of intent to apply to the Jeffers Foundation so we can look forward to be able to moving forward to rehabilitate these great structures that we have in our Eagle Point Park. So,
Thank you. And so yesterday, Easter, my wife and I parked down at the Ham House and walked all the way around, Eagle Point Park. And that's the best way to see the park is walking, because I saw buildings I'd never seen before when you go down to the end of the path, and there's these historic buildings. Amazing how they put them together. And there's just a lot happening at Eagle Point Park. But when you get out there and on foot and going all the way around the park, you just see what an amazing place it is. But you also see that there's a lot to do. So I'm glad that hopefully we can make a success of this, and that already it's a magical place. But when we get those help for those historic buildings, that's going to be great. So thank you for your help with this. Thank you, Mr. Calfage. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah. Mr. Sprague.
I'm looking forward that we're trying to figure out a way to fund fixing all the stuff up at Eagle Point Park. That was a big issue. A lot of citizens have definitely talked to me about it, so I'm glad that we're coming up with some options. So thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Ms. Wetham.
I just want to put out kind of a shameless appeal to everyone that we are able, as residents of Dubuque, to rent out these buildings. And I would encourage everyone this spring and summer and fall to go and do that. We had a family event there not too long ago that really helped me to just be in that space and understand the value of it. And so as we look as a community to raise those funds, I just want to push the idea of everyone getting out there, look it up online. You can rent these facilities, and just even for a family gathering or friends for a night, a book club. It's really just special spaces that can be even more special if we can work in this partnership. So, thanks.
Thank you. Any others? Thank you, Wally and Matt. Appreciate it. Okay. All right, well, motion here is to receive and file and approve. Adrian, would you call the roll, please?
Kavanaugh.
Aye.
Resnick.
Aye.
Staver.
Aye.
Wethel.
Aye.
Roussel.
Aye.
Sprank.
Aye.
Lyon Decker.
Aye.
That motion passes 7-0.
Action item number 5 is 2025 Dubuque Police Department Annual Report.
Mr. Mayor,
Ms. Roussel.
I move to receive and file and listen to the presentation. Second.
Motion by Roussel, second by Wethel. I'll turn it over straight to Chief Jensen.
Yeah, sorry, the obvious was right in front of me. Kind of wait for the presentation to pop up.
It's being run from there, okay.
Well, good evening, Mayor, City Council, Jeremy Jensen, Chief of Police. Wait for this to pop up. So this year, as always, we're presenting our annual crime stats. Last year, thanks to the PIO office, Randy Gale and his crew, had a very nice outward-facing flyer, which was included in your packet tonight. Part of the reason for that is, one, that the public can see what we have. The other reason is for our accreditation cycle. We have to give outward statistics when it comes to that. So here we go. So why do people want to live, work, and play in Dubuque? Simply, it's safe. There's a number of other reasons, but if the city is not safe, people don't want to be here. I mean, you can think of examples all across the country where that's the case. When it comes to why we're safe, it's people and technology. And this safety comes from an investment you all committed to and have committed to over the years. The first one is investing in quality officers. Have you heard me say before that we do not sacrifice quantity for quality? We're still not at full staffing yet. We're getting there. But part of that is we could be, but we'd have to sacrifice something, and we're not doing that. The other part of that is an investment you all made in the officers last year or 2 years ago with the raises that you gave to the officers on that, investing in them, showing that they're appreciated in the work they do. Also investing in experts. So part of what we have is sworn and non-sworn staff. Last year, we converted 6 positions to non-sworn staff, and I'll talk more about that here in a minute. But these are experts. When I got into law enforcement 30 plus years ago, law enforcement is jack of all trades. The technology, the expertise required this day and age is so beyond that. You can't be a jack of all trades. You have to have experts in areas in order to do this. And then investing in the community itself. So we have the Citizens Police Academy, explorers, police explorers, so the youth coming up, community involvement and safety. And a little bit with that, when we talk about community involvement and safety, just things like here in Dubuque, Secure Dubuque, where people can register their camera systems. They want to be part of their safety. We have that over close to 300 cameras registered in that, where people will say, hey, voluntarily say, hey, we want you to know I got a camera, so if something happens, you can come ask us for it. The other part of that, when you're talking about involvement in safety itself from the community side, community members here in Dubuque will report things. They will be witnesses to things. You don't hear that across the country in many places. Another part of that is just that it's really easy now to get a hold of us. You invested in the 911 side of things, and the various programs with that, text to 911, a number of things that make it easier for people to be safe and make it easier to report things to the police. So invested in technology. We talk about the camera system itself. You invested in that a long time ago. It has been a continued investment. Quite frankly, we're one of the most robust systems in the Midwest when it comes to that. And I'll talk more about the cameras in a second. Precision Policing Center. You all did a tour of the Precision Policing Center. You saw that. That's some of the non-sworn staff we converted. The ability to, again, with the cameras, the expectation is we look at them. That we use them to solve the crimes. That is the expectation from people. So we have to have people do that. That takes a lot of time. It's manual. It's not automated. Somebody has to go through and look and see when things are happening. The investment you made last year in our software upgrade that we're in the process of going through. So state-of-the-art software that's coming in. And we'll talk about that with crime stats, but even the computer hardware stuff. So our mobile data computers that are in our squad cars being up to date. That is how we do most of our business on patrol, is from that computer in the car. It keeps them from officers having to run across town to come into the law center to do work. They can do it right there, but on top of it, getting info they can get right at their fingertips in the car. Then investing in accountability. And as you've heard me report before about us being CALEA certified, we've been continuously certified since 1993. We're the first one in Iowa. We just last year went through our 10th certification process. We have 459 standards that are reviewed by CALEA every 4 years. They do 100 plus each year on that. It is an investment for us to do that, but it also it's the industry best practices that we're following when we do that. So crime stats. This is the first year of our crime analyst, one of the positions you approved to non-sworn. When we're talking about crime stats, so now we have an expert in crime stats. Before we had officers or somebody just run us in our system and just get data. Crime data is a lot like an onion. You start peeling that back, there's more and more and more, and you can ask more and more questions and more questions. At some point we say, this is where our consistent standard's gonna be. That's what we're really looking for with our crime analyst. One person looking at it and looking at it consistently the same way. Crime stats are incredibly nuanced and are not reported exactly the same from city to city. I saw a criminologist state that when you're talking about crime stats, what you're looking for is what does the city want from the crime stats? It's not comparable across the nation. We'll have some comparables across the nation, but it really is what does our city want to know? And that's what we're really trying to do. Our biggest thing is being consistent with them. And that has been, like I said, software, and as technology improves, we're able to do this. And as we get people that are experts, we're able to do that better. These are our calls for service of the last 3 years. You'll notice a downward trend. Why is that? And again, you start to talk about stats and you start to talk about things, but when you see a downward trend like this, it's again, there's nuances in it. Is it just people not calling us, right? And that's part of it, obviously. There's less. Historically, people have called us for everything. The police was the first call for everything, There's a pothole on my street, call the police. That's how that happened. You're seeing that trend. We're getting better at getting it to the people that do it. We're not having 5 touches. So ironically, I think you'd see is that we touch it, it shows up as a call for service for us, might show up as a call for service for public works, for water, for all these different things. So you had 4 or 5 touches. A lot of what we get now is with things that historically have been calls for service, we'll have people actually go and tell us that, I just wanted to let you know. I don't really need you to come out and that kind of thing. So we're starting to dissect some of that a little bit better too. And another thing is this, we talk about our staffing and stuff. Inexperience that we have on some of that, sometimes it takes longer for us to do calls. So you're going to see that just a bit longer. But along that line, we want them to take longer. We want officers to be accurate and do the best they can. So we'd rather have that than take shortcuts. So here's our Part 1 crimes. So Part 1 crimes are, when you talk, these are the things that we report to the FBI. These are violent crimes, crimes against persons. When you're talking like homicides, violent assaults, or aggravated assaults as it's stated in there, rapes, and what am I missing? I'm missing one here. Hold on. Robbery. Geez, how did I miss that one? Robbery on those. And then when you're talking about crimes against property, you're talking about theft of motor vehicle, arson, burglary, and theft. What's interesting is when you're talking about these types of stats compared nationally, like aggravated assault, it means something different in our state code than it does on the federal reporting. So what we could report, what we could charge as an aggravated assault in the state of Iowa is not an aggravated assault that gets reported to the federal government. So there's a little bit of nuance in there. Additionally, with burglaries, what you'll see here is burglaries also include burglary to motor vehicles. In Iowa, burglary to motor vehicle is a misdemeanor. So, but it gets reported here where we wouldn't report it beyond that. So this is where the nuances come in the statistical side of things. If you look at the trends, we're downward trending on crime. Now, we will never be at 0. I want to emphasize that. It's just impossible to be at 0 crime rate when you have people. We'll never be there. But as you look at the trends again, particularly at crimes against persons, you look at the difference on those numbers, it's very few. Statistically, it's not a big number. Crimes against property, one burglary spree to a bunch of cars, 100 cars overnight, that skews that number immensely. So understand that when it comes to crime stats. But again, we're very safe, we're very low crime as we talk about this. Another thing with that, as we look at data, we have very little crime, particularly against persons, that are stranger crime. Generally, the two people involved, the victim and the suspect, know each other in some way, shape, or form. So it's not always that case all across the country. Shots fired, we're at 6. Now, you'll see it in there, or trending, as you see in there, it kind of goes up and down. Generally, when we see an up, we generally have 2 groups that are shooting at each other. That's what happens. But we hear this, that quote is from our criminals. We've heard that numerous times. You're going to get caught in Dubuque. You're going to get caught and you're going to get convicted. We send a lot of our gun cases, because they meet federal firearms violations, to the U.S. Attorney's Office. And they're tough on it, and plain and simple. Clearance rates. So in the past, you saw our clearance rates. We've talked about suspended cases versus the UCR reporting cases. We report on suspended cases. This year, you saw it a little bit different. We reported it a lot further. As we got our expert, we also found out that UCR reporting, we report cases that are cleared. We clear the case. That's how we clear it. The FBI wants to clear cases, so you'll see difference in UCR reporting from us. They want it by victim. So you could have a crime that has 3 victims. We clear the case. They're clearing it by victim. Now, if it doesn't get attributed to that victim, though the case is cleared with that, you can show a difference in that. So it's really, again, nuanced. But again, we want to be just consistent how we do it, so you all have a accurate snapshot of what's going on. The other thing is, not all crimes are reported in this year are cleared in that year. So cases are ongoing. We have an end of year. We don't shut down in December to get all our numbers together. That would be lovely. I'd love to do that, but we don't get to do that. So you have the numbers that carry over into the year. So you're not going to see that. So every time we ran this, so when we're a month later than we normally are, the numbers changed. They kept changing every time we ran it because cases are getting cleared as that's going on. So you see this number changing. And again, it could change for years because some cases could remain open for years. Brain health. I've reported on this a number of times. As you're seeing, this is actually it went up again. So 2024, 2025, it went up again significantly. A couple reasons. One of those reasons, I truly believe the brain health calls went up in 2025. We have the 3-person division that works on this, the 2 officers, and then our liaison that works with them. So they're doing more. You'll see that. But also, it is a prevalent thing. And we saw, you look at the trend before 2021, we almost doubled when it went into that. So that's still continuously high. But what goes along with this is that we're able to essentially keep people out of jail. Jail isn't necessarily the best place for a lot of these calls. A lot of these calls, when I talk about calls for service downtrending, some of these calls that their CIT officers are dealing with, they deal with one time. That had been 13 calls in a day from that person. So that would add to that number. Somebody in crisis will do that and over and over and over. So they're effectively handling it in one call as opposed to handling it over 13 responses. Force multipliers. I talked a little bit about this with the technology and the people. But the technology and non-sworn staff are force multipliers to the sworn staff. They can do things that pull a patrol officer off the street to sit in the center for 3 hours and look at cameras, or try to learn technology that might be I'm not real proficient in because this is so far advanced. They help. They help every officer. They don't just help one. They help the whole system. So this is the future. This is using force multipliers to really offset what's going on the street and to be more efficient, more effective, and to be able to do our jobs just the best we possibly can. So our Precision Policing Center, I'll give you some stats with that. Again, first full year, well, not full year of having it, almost a full year now, but these are the numbers from 2025. The 4 non-sworn staff, the 5th one, we're in the process of hiring our computer forensics person. We just started that process now, so that should be coming on soon. But they did 322 cases, 1,300 hours looking at cameras to do this. They're making their own cases, and I'll highlight a couple. You heard them talk about this, but I'll highlight them again. The ATM jackpotting that you hear all over the place, they were able to find the vehicles, crack that down, notify other agencies of this regional crime that's happening, and get the persons arrested within an hour of finding the vehicle because they found them in Cedar Rapids an hour later. So this is the stuff they're doing that's helping us, the force multiplier side. Again, an officer working that and not being able to connect all the dots and then having them be able to do that for them. The cameras. What you believe about them or not, we've had a lot of talks here about cameras in the past, and particularly automated license plate readers and speed cameras. But cameras give us the speed and accuracy. I've talked about the in the past, you heard the first 48 hours on a homicide investigation. Here in Dubuque, it's the first 48 minutes because we can go look at cameras. It is literally that fast to start doing things. The accuracy of it. In the past, relying on victims in a traumatic situation or witnesses in a traumatic situation, giving us a description. A lot of times vague, sometimes wrong. Cameras give us accuracy on that. So opponents of cameras will tell you all the bad things we could do with the cameras. We have a very robust policy on the cameras. We have a very robust training on our cameras, and we want our officers to use it right. If somebody uses it wrong, they're going to get in trouble for it. But nobody's asking the victims. What you see is everybody asking the people about what we could or should have done wrong with it. But ask the victims. Are they happy with how fast we're going? Nothing's worse than being a victim and have to sit there and wait and wait and wait for an answer to the crime that happened to you. So this is a piece that I can't emphasize enough. Ask the victims what they think of that. And in closing, it really is, when you look at the stats, it's all about the safe community. It's all about the partnerships. It starts with the elected official level down to what we're doing down to the community and what the community's involvement with it. So this is all about, it's a complete partnership. This does not work if it's just us, it's just you, it's just the community. We all have to be partnered together in order for us to have a safe community. Without that, it won't be. Something will fail. So with that, any questions?
Thank you very much, Chief. We appreciate the presentation. Questions, discussion? Well, we've got Ms. Russell.
I would just like to point out one good example that you gave us of people are saying, you know, what are you doing to save money and do things better? And your example of the police force using technology and non-sworn officers to help the entire police force to be more effective is such a great example of how we are using our resources more effectively to make better use of the funds we have.
Thank you, Ms. Rousseau. Mr. Resnick.
Quickly, we're out in the community a lot, not as often as you, but quite a bit, and we are really pleased to see how many of your personnel are out there with the community. And I was always taught that, you treat others as they treat you. And you can see how well those officers treat everybody in the community, from the little kids, whether they're playing with them at the park or they're giving some demonstrations and other things. And I think that's reflected back upon you and your officers. That kind of community work really builds a trust, and I hope we continue that. I appreciate the stats, but more, like you said at the beginning, I really appreciate the people who take the time to work with our residents and let them know that, you've got their backs. So thank you for that.
Yeah, our officers have to be a part of the community. And again, that's building of the trust. It's, as I say, be on the first name basis with people. And that's how we work together effectively. Get rid of the power dynamic, get rid of all that. It really comes down to that.
It's not in the stats, but yes, it's reflected in the stats. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Ms. Wethel.
I just wanted to really focus in on the CALIA certification. You had said that it's an investment. And I just want to build upon that statement because I know that it takes incredible amounts of time and effort and commitment to have you as a department go through that, but it creates a quality product. And it ensures that we are doing best practice for our community. And so I hope that people at home will acknowledge that it's not just a plaque you put on a wall. It's something that makes sure that for now and for years to come, our police officers are put in a culture of integrity, responsibility, and best practice. It's just so important, and I hope people in the community know that importance. One thing I want to drive home also, from the times that I have done a ride along with maybe one of the newer officers to one of the most seasoned officers in the department, it is clear that you create a culture of how you care for our community. You care. And so the crisis intervention team, although the numbers on our brain health calls have gone up, I would say that in certain situations, families feel more comfortable placing that call for their loved one because they have built a relationship with a person. And you have ensured that that's a sustainable model for years to come in our community. And so although I see that those numbers go up, those numbers go up because you're building relationships with families who need help with their loved one, or community members who say are worried about a neighbor. A lot of these are incredibly empathetic calls from people who care about their community. So the other piece is the non-sworn officers, and how in healthcare we talk about working to the extent of your licensure. We want people to be able to do the maximum amount of work and use their skills that they can use and allow others to use the maximum amount of their skills to create an efficient environment. And so I think that the vision that you have created with non-sworn officers allows us to do that, where our officers are not sitting behind a computer desk looking through hours and hours of footage. We have people in real time doing that work. And so I don't know how you put a number on that or calculate that. I don't think you can, but I have seen it myself with my own eyes, and I really appreciate that. Those folks are really, they're non-sworn officers, but boy, are they a part of the team. So thank you.
All right. Any others? Well, Chief, thank you very much for being here tonight to show this report once again this year. I really appreciate that you pointed out this last slide here. I mean, I've been talking to, sometimes I'm invited to speak to college students and actually incoming college students and their parents at the same time. And it's great to be able to, as the mayor, stand in front of them and say, without hesitation, I think you're coming to one of the safest communities in the United States. It's one of the safest places in the Midwest. You're never going to have zero crime, as you said, but to be able to have the trust that I have in you and your department, to know that our community can have that trust in you and your department to be able to do all this work and work, because you work with lots of different city departments to get this done and community organizations to get it done. I feel very good to live in a place where I can, and very proud, honestly, to say that I stand in front of people and be able to say that out loud and to know that I'm telling the truth. So thank you very much for the work that you do and to all the officers that you do it with. All right. Okay. Well, we just had a motion here to receive and file, hear that presentation. So Adrian, would you call the roll, please?
Kavanaugh.
Aye.
Resnick.
Aye.
Staver.
Aye.
Wethel.
Aye.
Roussel.
Aye.
Sprank.
Aye.
Lyon-Decker.
Aye.
That motion passes 7-0.
Action item number 6 is work session request economic mobility update.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Resnick.
I move that we receive and file and set the economic mobility update to April 20th from 5:15 to 6 p.m.
Second.
Got a motion by Resnick, second by Roussel. That's before a city council meeting. All right. Adrian, would you call the roll, please?
Kavanaugh.
Aye.
Resnick.
Aye.
Staver.
Aye.
Wethel.
Aye.
Roussel.
Aye.
Sprank.
Aye.
Lyon-Decker.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0.
Action item number 7 is work session request smart parking and mobility master plan.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Resnick.
I move that we schedule the work session for the Smart Parking and Mobility Master Plan to May 4th at 5:15, 2026. I guess I'll
All
finish
right.
it that way.
Yep.
Second.
I've got a motion by Resnick, second by Lyon-Decker. Once again, before a meeting.
Yes.
All right. Adrian, would you call the roll, please?
Kavanaugh.
Aye.
Resnick.
Aye.
Staver.
Aye.
Wethel.
Aye.
Roussel.
Aye.
Sprank.
Aye.
Lyon-Decker.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0.
Action item number 8 is work session request sustainable Dubuque.
Mr. Mayor,
Ms. Roussel.
I move to receive and file and set the work session for Monday, June 15th, 2026.
Second by Spring.
Got a motion by Roussel, second by Sprank. Adrian, would you call the roll, please?
Kavanaugh.
Aye.
Resnick.
Aye.
Staver.
Aye.
Wethel.
Aye.
Roussel.
Aye.
Sprank.
Aye.
Lyon-Decker.
Aye.
7-0.
Action item number 9 is Dubuque Gate and Pump Station Flood Mitigation Project Update Video.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Sprank.
I motion that we receive and file and view the video.
Second.
Got a motion by Sprank, second by Roussel. We can roll the video, please, Eric.
Since they've done the Upper B Branch project, everything that used to flow overland in the streets and flood goes into a channel now. And so it ends up in the 16th Street detention rather rapidly. So you have to be able to pump that out efficiently before it gets to a certain elevation, which would cause flooding in the downtown area. So it really is important to up the capacity of the new facility. The project's called the Dubuque Gate and Pump Flood Mitigation 16th Street Detention Project. It will replace the existing facility, which now has a capacity of somewhere around 220,000 gallons a minute, with something that is basically doubling the capacity they'll be able to pump, about 400,000 gallons a minute. Currently, they're installing 16-inch diameter steel circular piles. And part of the project is the new facility sits out into the detention basin. And in order to have a good foundation for that pump station to sit on, they have to put these piles in, and they're pounding them in to certain specifications. They'll come back in when they're done placing. There's 258 of them. Then they come back after that. They'll drill down to a designated elevation, but they'll put a reinforcing cage that'll fit in there, and then they'll fill it with concrete. So the project cost is somewhere upwards of $28 million. There are multiple sources of funding that were applied for this. Two of the big ones were grants, an EDA grant and then a FEMA grant, almost $16 million. Those are not like loans, those are grants they're given and you don't pay them back. There's some local sales tax money that's involved, so the funding comes from multiple sources. It's so important to have this piece of the puzzle done now.
All right. Well, thanks for everybody involved in that. It's great to be able to see that project being done, and it's definitely great to see that getting on the way to actually being there. It's going to be wonderful to have for sure. We've been working on it for a long time. Well, motion here was to receive and file. Watch the video. Adrian, would you call the roll, please?
Kavanaugh.
Aye.
Resnick.
Aye.
Staver.
Aye.
Wethel.
Aye.
Roussel.
Aye.
Sprank.
Aye.
Liondecker.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0.
Action item number 10 is fiscal year 2027 budget recommendation.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Resnick.
I move to receive and file and view the presentation.
Second.
Got a motion by Resnick, second by Wethel. Mike, it's all yours.
Thank you. Just a reminder that tonight is just the presentation of the budget, that you're going to have 8 public meetings after this where you're going to invite the public to come up and say their piece about every individual department after the department has presented, and the mayor and city council is going to have plenty of time to ask the department managers questions on those nights before the last night where you have to make all the final decisions. So tonight is not a decision-making night. It is just purely a presentation of the budget recommendation as the process, I'll use the term kicks off, even though, as you all know, you already had to set the tax levy. And I heard some criticism from some members of the public that they couldn't believe you set the tax levy before you knew what was going to be asked in the budget. Well, of course, that's the state law. So I get it's backwards, but that's the way the state law works. You have to set the levy first. So anyway, presentation of the budget recommendation. So this is basically the agenda of this presentation. I'm not going to go through all these things. You'll hear them as I go through it. But if somebody were to look at this item later, they would see how this was organized. So our theme of this budget, we believe, is a future-focused investment in safety, streets, and access to essential services. It's built on the goals and priorities that the mayor and city council adopted in September of 2025, where you had a 3-day strategic planning session involving a professional facilitator. Your 5-year goals were these: a healthy and safe community, financially responsible, high-performance city organization, sustainable and effective service delivery, robust local economy, diverse businesses and jobs with economic prosperity, livable neighborhoods and housing, great place to live, sustainable environment, preserving and enhancing natural resources, connected community, equitable transportation, technology, infrastructure, and mobility, diverse arts, culture, parks, and recreation experiences and activities. So those were your 5-year goals. And then you're asked, okay, what priorities can we focus on to best get us on the road to your 5-year goals? And here's the priorities you picked. Now, the first priority has mainly been dealt with already. It was dealt with immediately after the council goal setting. Not that we're not still trying to get commercial air service, but that was a more short-term thing that we were working on. Then the comprehensive fire station location and facility study, fire department staffing increases, police department full staffing and hiring, sanitary sewer investments and implementation, sports complex development, stormwater management investments and implementation, street maintenance rehabilitation program, continued implementation of Central Avenue Revitalization Plan, Downtown Master Plan update, Dubuque Law Enforcement Center short-term facility enhancements and future plan, East-West Corridor Roundabouts Project, the next phases of Chaplain Schmidt Island development, Parks and Recreation Master Plan adoption and implementation, Water Resource and Recovery Center facility and process improvements, and odor reduction. So once you set those goals and priorities, that was all given to the department managers and the boards and commissions, and they were asked, what resources do you need to accomplish the 5-year goals and the priorities of the mayor and city council? And then they made requests to me as the city manager, who has to make the recommendation to you, and that's where this budget recommendation comes from. What I'm recommending is a 1% increase in the property tax rate. The impact on the average homeowner would be a 3% increase in the average homeowner's property taxes, or $26.68 per year. The property tax asking would go up by just over $2 million. And to give you an example of the average residential property, that's valued at $213,211. Currently, they pay $889.20 in their city property tax portion, so not the school district or the county or the community college or any of the others. In fiscal year 27, if you accepted this recommendation, that would go up to $915.87, or a $26.67 increase. If you look at the long-term picture, since 1989, the average annual increase in property taxes for the average homeowner has been 1.52%, or $9.92 a year. And if the full homestead credit had been funded by the state, there's several years when they didn't fund it, that actually, the average would have been $7.32 a year. Now, there's other properties that are affected by property taxes besides residential. One of those is commercial property. Depending on the value of that property, it's impacted differently. So properties, commercial properties that are $150,000 or less, they actually would see over 5% property tax decrease. Commercial properties between $150,000 and $300,000 would see a 1.1% property tax decrease. And commercial properties between $300,000 and $450,000 would see a 0.3% property tax decrease. Now, the average commercial property tax, commercial property is $624,927, and they would experience an 18.1% property tax increase. Industrial property impacts, once again, it's different for different values of property. Industrial property of $150,000 or less would see a 5.2% decrease in their property taxes. Industrial property of $150,000 to $300,000 would see a 1.1% property tax decrease. And industrial properties between $300,000 and $450,000 value would see a 0.3% property tax decrease. Now, the average industrial property, which is $731,693, would see a 17.9% increase. If you look at our statewide position, there's only 11 cities in the state of Iowa with a population greater than 50,000. We would still have the lowest property tax rate of those 11 cities. The average of the 10 other cities would be 55% higher than Dubuque's property tax rate. And the highest city tax rate would be Waterloo, which would be 116% higher than Dubuque's property tax rate. Now, there were some questions during the process about the North End, and would they experience a significantly higher increase in property taxes than the average, than based on the rest of the city? And so we specifically interacted with the city assessor about that question, and this is the information he gave us. So if you look back to the 2014-2015 property tax reassessment year, so 10 years ago, the north end saw only a 0.3% increase in their appraised value, or I'm sorry, their assessed value. The rest of the city saw a 3.14% increase in their assessed value. So the north end saw substantially less of an increase in value. When you look then at 2020 to 2021, that reassessment year, the north end saw a 9.48% increase in their assessed value, and the rest of the city saw a 10.25% increase in their assessed value. Once again, the rest of the city higher than the north end. Now in 24-25, the most recent one, the north end saw a 9.66% increase in their assessed value. The rest of the city saw an 8.98% increase in their assessed value. So yes, the north end does have a slightly higher increase in their assessed value than the rest of the community. Now, I would say much of that is for some very good reasons. The city of Dubuque has invested hundreds of millions of dollars in the north end in the last 20 or so years. The B Branch watershed project alone is $250 million. The millions of dollars invested in Comiskey Park, the new Kerper Boulevard roundabout, the sanitary sewer upgrades on Kerper Boulevard. The sanitary sewer was replaced. A new lift station was built. A lift station was replaced. The city's partnership and investment in the Crescent Community Health Center now serves over 10,000 patients a year in the north. Not all the people are from the north end, but it's located in there. The Chaplain Schmidt Island project, which was an over $80 million investment. The 14th Street Railroad Overpass, which is not constructed yet, but it is designed, and we've gotten all the funding lined up for that over $50 million project. Part of that will be a complete streets project for both Elm Street and 16th Street. And then also for several years, we had a program where we assisted people in the north end who had flood damage from 6 presidential disaster declarations in 11 years. We assisted them in repairing their damage and replacing things like their furnaces and hot water heaters. Now, there's some discussion when the council adopted the property tax rate that there was some discussions about when this is all said and done. You're not allowed to increase that rate, but you can lower the rate. So there certainly are a lot of opportunities and challenges in this fiscal year 2027 budget recommendation, and I absolutely respect the right of the mayor and city council to lower the property tax rate through this process. The one thing I will ask you is that if you make cuts to lower the property tax rate, please cut things that are recurring expenses. Because if you cut things that are non-recurring expenses, but also still ask the property tax rate to be reduced, you just dig a hole for next fiscal year. So we start out in a hole when we're doing the FY28 budget. And one of my major concerns is the state legislature and the governor's office has made it clear that they're going to pass property tax reforms this year. I can tell you that since 2003, over the last 20 some years that they've passed property tax reforms, today we get over $6 million a year less in revenue than we would be getting if those reforms hadn't happened. I think that their idea of reform this year, again, will be to restrict the ability of the city to raise revenues. And so I already think we'll be starting off fiscal year 28 in a hole. And I just hope we don't dig the hole deeper ourselves by cutting non-recurring expenses to reduce this year's property tax rate. Besides property taxes, there's the enterprise fund utility rates that I'm making a recommendation on. So for the water rate, I'm recommending a 3% increase. So this year's rate is $22.50 for the average water user. it would go to $23.17 for a $1.26 per month, $1.26 per month increase in cost. On the sanitary sewer rate, it would go from $31.84 to $34.73 for the average user. That would be a $2.89 a month increase, or 9%. For the refuse rate, also recommending a 9% rate increase. That would go from $18.11 to $19.74 for a $1.63 increase. And the stormwater rate, a 9% rate increase, which would go from $11.03 to $12.02, or 99 cents a month increase for the average user. So the total increase of the utility rates for the average user would be $6.77 a month. One important point, low-income customers in Dubuque get a 50% discount on their base city utility rate. So these numbers I give you in the recommended fiscal year 27 rate column are not accurate for low-income residents. When you compare our water rates with the other cities in the state that, once again, with a population greater than 50,000, and in this case, we limit it to those that also do lime water softening like we do, an expensive and important process. So in that case, we have the second lowest water rate of all those. And you can see the average without Dubuque is much higher than the city of Dubuque. So as I said, Dubuque has the second lowest water rate. The highest rate, Cedar Rapids, is 45.51% higher than Dubuque's rate, and the average is almost 13% higher than Dubuque. In the sanitary sewer comparison, you can see that we have the fifth highest sanitary sewer rate, or you can say the seventh lowest, however, whichever way you want to say that comparison of the 11. And the average monthly fee in Dubuque is 14.6% lower than the highest city, which is Ankeny, and the average fee for all other cities is 9.6% lower than Dubuque's sanitary sewer rate. If you look at the rate increases over the last 7 years of these 8 cities, it shows you that Dubuque is pretty much in the middle. The average annual increase for the rate for Sioux City has been 8.8%, Council Bluffs 7.5%, Cedar Rapids 6.5%, and Dubuque is at 6.4%. I can tell you that both Sioux City and Cedar Rapids are doing major upgrades to their sewer plants, and in the areas of hundreds of millions of dollars. So I'm certain you'll see their rates increase at a higher pace going forward. Refuse rates, we don't have the comparisons to the other cities yet. We're still connecting with the other cities on what their rates are going to be, and we don't have all that information yet. One of the big things we're doing with our sanitary sewer system, with our refuse system, is we're switching to all semi-automated side loaders. Currently, we have 6 of those. We're purchasing 3 more over the next 5 years. And also, if you've ever seen the large item collections and you've seen what I'll call the grappler truck, we're going to be replacing that truck for $375,000. Stormwater rate comparison, yes, we have the second highest stormwater rate of those cities. And Dubuque's rate is 41% lower than the highest, which is Des Moines. But the average is 35% lower than Dubuque. And I'd make the argument with 6 presidential disaster declarations in 11 years and bordering the Mississippi River and having to deal with its tributaries, that we have a much bigger problem to deal with than these other communities do. We also provide subsidies on the stormwater rate. So property tax exempt properties get a 50% discount on the stormwater rate. Low to moderate income properties get a discount. Residential farm properties get a discount. And those that have private detention basins can get credit. So $610,000 a year is spent by the general fund to subsidize these discounts for the stormwater rates. I mentioned that low-income residents get a 50% discount on their base utility rates, and you can see how many residents apply for those. So in the 600 range are the numbers. Now, we think there's many, many more people that qualify. We're always trying to get the word out. It's actually printed on the utility bill. So we do our best to make sure people aware that you can get a reduction in your utility rates if you're low income. So this gives you an idea that there's $164,000 in reduced fees for low income people. Now that I told you that I asked the department managers, okay, what resources do you need to meet these goals and priorities of the council? One of the ways they do that is they have improvement package requests. So we had almost $3 million in improvement package requests from the departments, $659,000 in recurring, and $975,000 in non-recurring are being recommended to be funded. So nowhere near the $3 million in requests. And then there was discussion, as I said, when the property tax rate was, with the idea of during this process lowering the property tax rate. So the added revenue from the 3% is just about $2 million. If you lower the increase to 2% on the average homeowner, that lowers it by about $300,000. If you lowered it to 1%, that lowers it by about $600,000. If you lowered it to a 0% increase, that lowers it by about $900,000, which means in any one of those scenarios, that's how much of the recurring expenses you would have to cut out of the operating budget to meet those targets. One of the things we did this year was we eliminated one of the departments. We eliminated the Office of Economic Mobility and Neighborhood Support Department. So when the director of that department, which had 5 members, was promoted to the Director of Strategic Partnerships, we analyzed the position and decided to eliminate the director's position. And then we reassigned the other positions to different departments. So the Information Technology Department ended up with the Administrative Support Professional. Now that position already supported the IT department and the Human Rights Department, besides the Office of Economic Mobility and Neighborhood Support. So when we eliminated that department and reassigned that administrative support person, we added the 911 Emergency Communications Center to that person's responsibility, besides IT and human rights. Then we took our Community Impact and Neighborhood Support position, Tim Wafiri's in that position, and moved him to the Office of Community Impact. The same thing we did with the Community Impact and Neighborhood Support position, Corinne Rothblum, and that position is a grant-funded position, that last one that I mentioned there. Downtown TIF funding, so the change I'm recommending there actually doesn't happen in fiscal year 27, it happens in fiscal year 28. But in December of this year, we have to tell the county how much are we gonna claim in fiscal year 28 of the downtown TIF. Every year we say, well, not every year, but for the last probably 20 years, we've said 100%. Before that, we didn't always claim 100%. But I'm recommending that in December, we'll tell the county we're only gonna claim 75% of the downtown TIF revenues. Now, the unclaimed 20%, 25% will go back to the taxing bodies, including the city of Dubuque. So in FY 28, the school district will get almost $1.3 million in recurring property tax revenue, so that year and beyond. City of Dubuque will get about $1.2 million in recurring property tax revenues. Dubuque County will get almost $700,000 a year. Northeast Iowa Community College, $93,000. Sunnycrest Manor County Hospital, $64,000. Dubuque Agricultural Extension, $14,000. And the Dubuque City Assessor, $33,000. So that'll be $3.4 million that will not be claimed by the city of Dubuque to stay in the TIF to do projects or programs, but will be released to the taxing district, including the city of Dubuque. Now, this current year, in FY27, we're asking the downtown TIF to repay some internal loans that we've made to the downtown TIF over the years. And so that money will be used to fund non-recurring improvement packages in the budget. So that number I gave you before, that's where that money is coming to fund those non-recurring improvement packages. It's also being used to fund some recurring improvement packages. So you might say, well, wait a minute. You just said don't use non-recurring revenue to fund recurring expenses. The reason we can do that, a non-recurring revenue, this internal loan repayment, to pay some recurring operating expenses, is because what I just showed you is that next year we're going to have $1.2 million in recurring revenue from that TIF district that will replace that non-recurring revenue from this year. So the reduction in downtown TIF revenues beginning in fiscal year 28, when we only claim 75%, will be $3.3 million. And then in 29, it'll be 3.3, and 30, 3.4, and 31, 3.4. My point being is it's going to be a recurring experience that we're not going to have this money. So to make up for that, we had to change some funding on some projects in the downtown TIF district. The one that took the biggest change was the Five Flags renovation. So in the current year budget, 5-year cycle, you approved $23.5 million for Five Flags. Now, since we're losing over $3 million a year in revenue starting in fiscal year 28, I'm recommending that go down to $7 million, a reduction of $16.5 million. Now, first, we looked at the facility and said, hey, what do we need to do to fix what's broken? And that was about, in round numbers, about $6 million. So this provides just a little bit more than that to fix what's broken, like put a new roof on, those kinds of things, and then a little bit of money to do a couple of enhancements. Now, the Downtown Rehabilitation Grant Program is also going to be reduced. Now, it doesn't quite look like it from this. You'd say, well, it's only going to be reduced by $4,390. It's a little, in that first column, fiscal year 26 to fiscal year 30, it says 5.5 million, and then it says, okay, then what's available in fiscal year 26 to fiscal year 31? 5.5 million. The problem is 3.5 million of the 5.5 million in the second column is encumbered for existing projects. So these are projects you've already approved where the people just haven't finished them yet, so they haven't gotten their money yet. So remember the $10,000 per unit apartment, the $45,000 facade grants, those kinds of things. They don't get them until the project's done. So about $3.5 million of that's already encumbered. So it is about a $2 million reduction in resources in the downtown TIF for rehab grant programs. We're also creating a new program called the Downtown Storefront Retention Program, where we're helping new tenants in some of these commercial spaces pay their lease payments until they get on their feet. And so you'll learn more about that in the economic development presentations. Now, one good news is we were able to increase the resources going to the Central and White Street project. So in the current year budget, you approved $8.2 million over 5 years. If you approve this, you'll be approving $11.2 million over the next 5 years. We also were able to increase the resources to the East-West Corridor study. Now, the amount we increased it is not enough to do the project by any means, but it is enough to provide the match if we were to get the federal build grant that we applied for. And if we get the federal build grant, it will do the entire East-West Corridor project, and this would be our match. And I should take you back to the Central and White Street project. That $11.2 million is not enough to do all that project either. We would have to allocate money in future years and apply for grants to get to that number, which I think is about 7 million more than that amount. When you look at what is the debt that shows in the 5-year CIP, there's $77 million in debt that we're recommending be issued during the next 5 years. Now, general obligation debt, it comes in, your ability to use it comes in different forms. One is what's called the central corporate purpose debt, and that can be issued just by a vote of the city council. So like buying a new fire engine or truck for like $1.8 million, you can just vote, issue the debt, and do that. You don't have to worry about a referendum or anything. However, much of the debt can only be issued by a vote of the city council that is subject to a referendum, but in two different ways. One way is called a reverse referendum. So it's where you vote to issue the debt, and if nobody submits a petition asking for a referendum, there is no referendum. The other way is that it has to go directly to a voter referendum, and there's different rules on each one of these things that tell you about when you can do which kind. So there'll be major project decisions over the next few years that may require debt financing, but the scope, scale, and cost are not yet determined. So an example of that is you just adopted the Park and Recreation Master Plan. In that master plan was a whole lot of things like aquatic centers and another sheet of ice and recreation facility. We don't have any information on the cost of those yet. Now, you have already commissioned an analysis of the aquatic center, so we'll get that information sometime this summer. How much would that cost? And then in this budget, there's also a couple more studies that we're recommending you commission so we learn the cost of some of these other things. So when people talk about the cost of our infrastructure or the amount of our debt or the increases in the utility fees, I just want you to know this is not a Dubuque issue. This is a national issue. So I found two studies, one by McKinsey, very well-respected international consulting firm, and they said that there's a funding gap of up to $194 billion by 2030 for water utilities. By that, they mean water and resource recovery, like sanitary sewer. Then there's the ASCE, which is, well, anyway, it's the National Engineers Group. I can't remember exactly what the acronym stands for. And they did a report card on the national infrastructure, drinking water, C-, a $309 billion funding gap. Public parks, a C-, a $44 billion funding gap. Solid waste, a C+, a $16 billion funding gap. Transit, a D, $152 billion funding gap. And wastewater and stormwater, a combined $690 billion funding gap. One of wastewater got a D ranking and stormwater got a D+. Now, those are two of our biggest investment areas too, or also. But my point being is this is not just a Dubuque issue that needs to be tens and hundreds of millions of dollars invested into community infrastructure. This is a national issue. Now, one of your priorities related to Water and Resource Recovery Center, odor, and reliability investments. So these are the investments you've already made. We're dosing to reduce the sulfur content with different things like ferric chloride, and we're doing a cleaning of the activated sludge system over a 3-year cycle. We're cleaning the digesters. We're doing what we'll call resiliency upgrades for $1.4 million. We're doing monitoring upgrades where we can better monitoring the odors and sulfurs, the $135,000. And then we're looking at replacing all of our electrical controls for $7.2 million, and phase one is already underway for $2.46 million. So that's all the heart of how the whole system is controlled. And then at the same time, we're building a high-strength waste receiver system for $8.1 million. Now, that's actually being funded by the high-strength waste customers and a federal grant, not by the ratepayers. Then also, fire department staffing was a priority of yours. If you look at from fiscal year 22 to fiscal year 26, which is the current fiscal year, you've increased the staffing of the fire department by 17 full-time equivalent employees. So you've increased the staffing of the fire department over that 4-year period by 18.5%. In this fiscal year 27 proposal, we're recommending adding 9 additional firefighter paramedic positions. So that means over a 5-year period, you will have increased the staffing by 28%, or the 26 FTE equivalent positions. One of the ways we're going to be able to add the 9 firefighters is through a federal grant called the SAFER grant. And then also we raise the ambulance fees, and that will also fund the match for that grant and then help with some continuing annual expenses. In the Park and Rec Master Plan that you just adopted, it recommended adding 7 positions. Those were requested in this budget. However, I'm only recommending 2 of them because that's what's affordable. And those are both park maintenance technicians. And if you include the 1 park maintenance technician you added this year, that'll be 3 new park maintenance technicians in just 2 years. When you look at some of the major capital projects in the budget, the Catfish Creek sanitary sewer improvements, the 7th Street and Locust Street stormwater upgrades, the 14th Street railroad overpass, a new deep well for the water department to deal with PFAS issues. Now, if the mayor and city council thinks that the utility rate increases are too high, one of the ways you could lower those utility rate increases were to delay some of these major capital improvement projects. Public safety is a citywide commitment. Of course, you just had the report from the police department about their annual report, but it's not just a police issue. Every one of our departments has a role in public safety. So the next steps in this budget process are there'll be 8 public input sessions. You'll get to see all kinds of different information through that. We're going to continue to pursue federal grants. I'll just leave it at we're going to continue to pursue federal grants. And we're going to continue to do what I think is prudent planning. So the public meetings are tomorrow night, April 7th, which is Engineering, Public Works, Water, and Water Resource Recovery Center. Thursday, April 9th is Housing and Community Development, Planning Services, Economic Development, Purchase of Services, and Transportation Services. Monday, April 13th is the Library, Five Flags, Grand River Center, I'm on Ice Center, and the Recreation and Parks Department. Wednesday, April 15th is Human Resources, Information Technology, Communications, and Finance. Thursday, April 16th is City Manager's Office, City Council, City Clerk's Office, and City Attorney's Office. Tuesday, April 21st is the Airport, the Office of Human Rights, Community Impact and Neighborhood Support, the Multicultural Family Center. Wednesday, April 22nd is Police, Fire, Emergency Management, Emergency Communications, and Health Services. And then on Tuesday, April 28th, is the final public hearing to adopt the budget. And at that night, you will have to set the final property tax rate. Remember, it can be the same that's been recommended and approved by you already, or it can be less, but it can't be higher. And by state law, the budget has to be adopted before May 1st. So April 28th will be your last day to do that. At every one of these nights, there's a public input component, including the last night. So the public has plenty of chances to have their voices heard. And if I could answer any questions, I'd be happy to do that.
Well, thank you very much, Mike. What questions do we have at this moment? Knowing that there's plenty of opportunity for specific questions about specific departments later, but we can ask anything we like at the time. Ms. Wethel?
I've already received a great deal of feedback from residents regarding our proposed rates. Again, they are proposed, these are not set. These are, there's a maximum rate that it has been voted on, and that is it. There's no final rate. There are numerous opportunities to come in public, but also I encourage people to reach out to me. And in reaching out, I hope that you'll propose to me the things about Dubuque that you love and the things about Dubuque that you need to tighten the reins on. Because we can't have both. We have to have both. We have to say, yes, we want this more, but this doesn't matter as much to my family. And so in the process of making these decisions, I don't want to hurt people. I want to make the right choice, but I want to hear from you about what those choices are. Thank you.
Thank you. Mike, I have a question. Please, Mr.
Well,
President, please,
just
go ahead.
quickly, I don't know if this is the right time for this question, but I also was contacted by somebody over the weekend with the same question about how to read these graphs that are meant to help people understand the budgeting process. And the woman who talked about, well, here's the budget, here's how much is used this year. And they didn't understand, and maybe lots of people don't, because it's confusing and it changes quite a bit.
Right.
And I totally understand when I get a question, well, you know, the Public Works has a $30 million budget and we've only spent $10 million. So why, you know, what's that about?
Right.
And so I know that it's a short question with a long answer, but in order for citizens to follow what's going on and to answer some of the questions, and I know that chart is meant to help people. I didn't see any spots on the website that says, you know, here's some possible reasons why you're seeing what you're seeing. Is there any way that we could perhaps, as part of this budget process, to maybe do especially that page on the website, let them understand how some things work, and there's got to be you know, some flexibility in that. Again, I don't know if it has to do with this discussion or not, but the people are interested in following, as Ms. Wethel has just talked about. They are interested, very interested in this process, and I just would like to help them as much as possible. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, and we are going to look at that site, because I would agree with the woman's comments that it can be confusing. So we're gonna do our best to limit that level of confusion. It is complex and complicated, no doubt about it. You know, you get carryovers from previous years on projects that weren't completed yet and things like that. Yeah, we're gonna look at it a little harder.
Thank you.
Can we take a quick moment to just directly address that, though? Because that was a question I was just about to ask. You know, there was the idea that there is an approved budget in an annual basis, and then there's the actual budget that was used on an annual basis. It's a pretty common thing in any large organization, I would say. But in a city government, you know, there's reasons why this occurs. And if we could just outline some of those, then maybe we can talk more about it in detail when we come to your presentation, Jennifer. But yeah, whatever you got now.
Jennifer Larson, Chief Financial Officer. So the tool being referenced on the website, the open expense tool, when it references approved budget, it's actually amended budget. So it's not, you know, the original adopted budget. It's with any amendments City Council has adopted, and we typically do 2 amendments each fiscal year. So we do an amendment at the beginning of the fiscal year, typically goes to public hearing in late September. And so that's to pick up any projects that have not been fully completed and to carry over those project funds so that they're included in the next year's budget. There will also be what we call encumbrance carryovers. So those are for typically routine purchases in departments, or they could also be related to projects. So those also carry over and increase the budget because they're committed to vendors for payment. So that's a majority of the first budget amendment. And then we're actually working on a second budget amendment right now for our current fiscal year 26. And that is just to pick up any activity that has been approved by City Council since the last amendment in late September. Or it could be, we may have, for example, gotten new grants that we need to amend in the appropriation because we cannot spend money that we get without adjusting our expense budget. So, yeah, we typically do 2 amendments, and so what's being seen on the website is the amended budget, and yes, we will look at making that more explained on the website.
It does happen, right, that we end up with extra money at times at the end of the year. I remember that happened this year, at the previous fiscal year. That is an occurrence that does happen, right?
It does happen. I think common in the general fund has been vacancy savings related to the police department, but as they fill their vacancies, there'll be less money left at the end of the fiscal year. And then, of course, we have the enterprise funds that are fully self-supporting with their user fees. So they may have some things that they didn't expend, like if, for example, chemicals or something they budgeted for, utilities were less than projected, then they'll have some money left.
So, in my understanding correctly, the way I look at this is what we're trying to do is do our very best at coming up with an amount that predicts what we're going to need in this next year based on the facts that we have in front of us right now. That's generally what we're trying to do here, right? I mean, we need to come up with some sort of a way of, and we try to be as realistic as we can be with that. And the choice we have is we can either, we can go overboard, or we can be too restrictive, or we can kind of get it just right. And we're trying to find that place on that spectrum in some way. Am I
Yes,
crazy in thinking about that, or does that make sense more or
No,
less?
that is accurate. So at the beginning of every budget cycle, so for our case, it would be right after the city council does their goal setting. The budget office prepares budget instructions with those guidelines, looking at utility counts and what percentage increase those should be, and wage increases, and other supplies and services increases. So we're reviewing, analyzing all those increases, working with the city manager on what should be used for those increases in departments. And then we're also projecting revenue. So again, the budget staff is constantly working with the city manager on our projections. We're looking at historicals, where revenues are coming in the current fiscal year. So we're looking at as much data as possible to do revenue and expenditure projections. For the general fund specifically, for the enterprise funds, it goes a step further. We have a financial advisor, independent public advisors. She assists us with looking at enterprise funds because there is debt involved there that also has bond covenants. And then she also helps us look at what rate increases should be recommended.
Great. Thank you, Jenny.
Yep.
That's helpful. Ms. Wethel.
One other question brought to mind by what you just said. There additionally, for instance, federal grants such as the East-West Corridor grant, and I'm sorry, I cannot remember the name of it. We have match money for these sorts of grants that we must hold, waiting to see if we get the grant, but the grant requires us to hold that money. And so at times it will look like we have more held, but we have to be prepared to pay for that grant. And I know some of those come from general funds and some don't, but are there other examples of that in this last fiscal year that might explain the concerns that were voiced?
Yeah, I mean, the city has a high number of federal and state grants that are awarded for capital projects. So until those capital projects are finished, our local match will be sitting there. I mean, the airport is also an example. A lot of the Federal Aviation Administration funds require a local match. So until those projects are complete, our local match is, sitting there until they're, need to be matched on the grant. So yeah, that's an example. And then of course there's a lot of large infrastructure projects going on. So those take time to complete. They're not 12-month projects. They might be 2 or 3 year lengthened projects. And then even equipment purchases, if they're large, like dump trucks or fire trucks, those take multiple years to come in, especially fire trucks.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right. Yeah, Mr. Resnick.
Mr. Milligan, I noticed, over the years that many of our projects have a contingency of 5 or 10%. Is the budget constructed in the same way? I mean, we can't go over. Do we have contingency extra that we put on? I mean, you're a careful budgeter, and as you say, we can't operate with the deficit.
So we only use contingencies on capital projects, but as you say, we're not allowed to operate in a deficit. So you can adopt a deficit budget. And so we can't have a deficit budget. So we know that things are going to happen during the year. Somebody's going to retire or somebody's going to resign and take a job with another employer. But in fact, we budget for their salary for all year. What if that doesn't happen? And so we're pretty much assured by the end of the fiscal year, we're going to have money left in the budget because we budgeted for, and that's just the perfect example. We have 795 full-time equivalent employees. There's going to be turnover, but we don't try and judge, well, we think we'll have like 10% turnover, so we're not going to budget for 10% of our employee cost. What if we only have 5% turnover? What do we do then? How do we pay our people? So we don't have a contingency built in, but we do realize that there are things that are going to happen during the year that will probably make it so we'll have money left at the end of the year. Now, on the bad side, things are going to happen too. We're going to do projects where they're going to come in more expensive than we thought, or we're going to buy pieces of equipment that they just put a 30% tariff on, and we're going to pay 30% more than we thought we were going to. So bad things happen too. It's not all good. And yeah, so it's a balancing act.
Yeah, and finally, you mentioned the recurring, non-recurring, and I know we put money every year. I think we try to put money into the reserve fund. Would you say that's a recurring cost? But because I'm sensing it's somewhere in between a recurring and non-recurring, since we do it every year.
No, because we do not try and add money to our reserves every year. We have a target reserve that we try and maintain, and we budget for that reserve. But in this year, yes, we are recommending we add to the reserves in anticipation of the property tax reform. So I guess you could say, in a way, we add to the reserves every year because the target's 25%, and our budget generally goes up every year. So there's a little incremental increase, but it's not at any significant level, except for this year. We are recommending to add a couple of $1 million to the reserves.
And as Ms. Roussel talked about, we will have a special talk about that whole. She asked at the budget on the 23rd about whether or not we can hold discussion about that, a more complete discussion about that at another time. So I'm through with those questions. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I just wanted kind of a point of clarification. So I think she was specifically talking about the 32 million versus 20 million gap in budgeted and spent. Was she saying that essentially the money is spent, it's just not spent yet?
I'm not sure which one you're referring to. Jennifer Larson's comment?
Well, let's talk, more or less. I think she was referring to the first statement.
The
in
amendment?
regards to the confusion of.
Yeah, so there's the budget that you adopt. So for example, for 27, you'll adopt a budget on April 28th. And then the city council, we typically do 2 amendments. So what's showing on that open expense portal is the amended budget. So for 2026 that it's showing, we've already adopted 1 amendment. So yes, the amended budget shows what is budgeted to be spent, and then actual shows what's been spent. So the difference would be what is to be spent yet that is budgeted.
But it might be a truck that hasn't come in yet, but.
Yep, and some of it could be capital projects depending on where you're at looking in that portal.
You might be behind on schedule, so.
Right.
Yeah, and that capital project is a really big deal. So, you think about we have a $50 million project to build the 14th Street Railroad overpass. That'll take 4 years to build. So that money will get carried over and, that entire time.
It looks like you have it, but it's.
Yeah, but
spent
it's all
already.
committed. It's already gonna be gone.
Mr. Mayor,
Are you done, Mr. Staver? Yep.
I just want to quickly say that they get awards every year for what the work they do. And it's all accurate, it's all good, and it's all the way it's right, but it is complicated to talk about it. It's such a shifting landscape with things, but I think you have a few good answers for things like, is it a truck? I mean, I didn't even know it was combined capital and operating costs on that one chart that we were talking about. But that includes the capital costs as well.
So the total budget you're going to be asked to adopt is $265 million. $185 million of that is operating cost, and $81 million is capital cost.
And the capital is included on that page in the website we've been talking about?
So I think there's multiple ways you can look at it on open expense. You can specifically look at operating, you can look at capital, and I think you can also look at it in total with both operating and capital.
Great. Well, thanks for the great work. I mean, I know there's a lot that goes into it, and they do fine work. So thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right, anybody else before we close out? All right. Well, I just want to say a few things as we kind of kick this off here. So, honestly, we do this the hard way in Dubuque. We really do. There aren't any, I don't know of any other cities in Iowa that do this with 8+ public hearings to be able to talk about every single department and do it. What you'll notice is that it's going to wear us out a little bit. It's going to wear the staff out a little bit. It's sort of an event every year for the community to be here and to be able to do this. It's not just about budgeting either. It's also about being able to showcase the work that each department does. In some ways, it's a bit of a celebration of the things that have happened and the things that are going on, and I think that's healthy and I think it's good. But it is the hard way. I think it's the right way. I actually do think that it's a good way to do this. I actually think that more cities should adopt an approach like this. It's just very work intensive. But one of the things that I think we want to make sure we recognize as the 7 of us here is that we are absolutely where the buck stops in this situation. So we are the ones that have been entrusted by our community to make the really hard decisions in the end when this is all said and done. It might look like, the staff is making really hard decisions and bringing these proposals to our city manager. City manager had to make really hard decisions to be able to give us this presentation. But we are the ones who decide in the end. And I think there's a high level of responsibility that comes with that. Because we do it, we're entrusted to make the hardest decisions that people have to make in the community, basically, about what this tax money is doing. I do think that it's absolutely responsible to always look for any way to be more efficient and effective and limit the increases in taxation whenever we possibly can. I think that's a very responsible way to budget. But I do not think it's responsible as a city council to only look at that and ignore the bigger picture of what we want to be as a city. So I hope that we can keep that in mind as we're going forward in this. And I think we all are. I trust every one of us here at this desk that are thinking about that, to keep in mind this idea of what is it that our residents want in the city of Dubuque? What do our residents want the city of Dubuque to become? Because when I say become, I don't mean like next year. I mean like the next 20 years. How do we set ourselves up for that level of success at the same time as doing as much as we can to keep the taxation pressures low on our residents? Those are basically the decisions that we have before us. So I'm looking forward to the discussions that we're going to have. I think they're going to be very, very good. I think that we've had some really good ones leading up to this so far. I think even just setting the property tax hearing has been a really healthy discussion so far. So I'm looking forward to being able to go through each of these meetings as I do every single year and talk to all the department directors and ask the hard questions and be able to figure this out as we go forward. So with that said, motion here was to receive and file that presentation and listen to that. So Adrian, would you call the roll, please?
Kavanaugh.
Aye.
Resnick. Aye. Staver.
Aye.
Wethel.
Aye.
Roussel. Aye. Sprank. Aye. Leyendecker.
Aye.
That motion passes 7-0.
Next are council member reports.
All right. We're already having a late night, but it has been 3 weeks. since we saw each other. So I'm sure we've got a few things to describe here. Ms. Wethel.
I'll just mention a couple. On March 19th, I met with Jason White from Greater Dubuque Development Corporation, the new president and CEO of the organization. Had a great conversation about his contributions already to the community and what he looks forward to doing in his new role. That same evening, actually, I went to the Lantern Center sold out event where Alex Baum from the Community Foundation of Greater Dubuque spoke about how fortunate we are to have the growth in our population of our immigrant community. It was an incredibly informational, data-driven discussion. I really appreciated it. And then on March 26th, I met with Tony Calabrese from the Dubuque Community Y. Learned about he and his board's reflection on where they have been and where they're going.
Thanks, Ms. Wethel. Ms. Rousseau.
Thanks. I love spring, and so I've been really busy. I signed up to volunteer on the Volunteer Dubuque website to volunteer with RAGBRAI. I attended a Dubuque Main Street Board meeting, Greater Dubuque, and the great event for the Lantern Center. Met with a group of people from Dubuque Soccer Club regarding soccer opportunities for youth here in Dubuque. Participated in a hunger outreach for food distribution with my church. Participated in Dubuque Trees Forever, our spring maintenance project up at the Hill Street Orchard. And in my life as a private citizen, I always do a lot of work with volunteers. And so I have started a new group called Friends of Dubuque Parks, and we've had our first formal meeting last week. And this is something I've been thinking about since last year's budget hearings. And I've decided to work with Colleen McKenna, she's going to co-chair this with me, and we've already got a Facebook page and a website coming soon, just to get citizens involved in enjoying and enhancing our parks. So more to come. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Any others? No? All right. Yeah, Mr. Leindecker.
Yeah, so I was out of town for a week, so I had some work travel going on. But last week, met with Jason White as well, so I had a great meeting with him and getting to understand his priorities as taking over as head of GDDC. Looking forward to his involvement in that organization at a leadership level now. And then on March 31st, I met with Bluff Strokes. So I met with the director, Rachel Dack, and Jelaine Pinchuk, and had a great meeting with them and learned about the programming that they're doing and some of the initiatives they have in our community. So it was great to get engaged with them and hear what they have going on. It's exciting stuff, and I think it's a great benefit for our residents in the city of Dubuque. So
that's great. Thank you. All right. Well, I'll just briefly mention a few things. Also had some travel, but when I was here, I got a couple of great opportunities. The first was to be able to announce the RAGBRAI logo and the RAGBRAI route with Chief Jensen, everything that's going through town. Just talking about RAGBRAI so much is really, really exciting. It's a lot of fun to think about. I'm really looking forward to that day for the whole city. Also spending a lot of time in schools lately. I'm just saying yes to the invitations that I get to go and talk to students at all levels of grades, and it's been a lot of fun. It's so interesting when we hear when you have anybody 18 and younger telling you what they think Dubuque should look like and what they think Dubuque should have. And I tell them all the same thing at the end of whatever I'm saying. I just make sure that they know this, that when they show up in this room or any time in front of one of us, I tell them that I see all of you go, oh, that's interesting. There's a young person here. I really want to know what they have to say, because it doesn't happen very often. And it's actually really powerful when it does. So I appreciate the opportunity to be able to tell our young students that. I did travel twice. Once I was gone during a meeting actually with the National League of Cities in Washington, D.C. The bottom line with that entire conference this year was discussion about civility. It really was all about civility. And I got to be on a panel talking about civility with several other community leaders, and the president of the National League of Cities was the moderator for that. And it really spoke to me on how important that is for everybody in talking about it. And I just want to commend all of us for the work that we do here. the meetings we have are very civil meetings, and we do a really good job of it. And I know we're going to continue that, and I do appreciate it very much, and I have for many years. So just know that we're doing a good job of that here, and I think we can keep it up and continue to be an example for the rest of the community. And then finally, Dubuque Night in Des Moines was last week. So we had Dubuque Night, invited all the legislators from the legislature to be there and be able to join us. Had to compete with NASCAR. We did okay. There was a pretty important NASCAR event out at the Newton Speedway, so everybody was running in all directions all night long, but I really appreciate everybody who always comes to Dubuque Night. It is a great night in Des Moines, and it's great to be able to celebrate all things Dubuque with people from all over the state. So we have a closed session, so I will take a motion, please.
Mr. Mayor,
Ms. Wethel.
I move that we go into closed session according to Chapter 21.51A CJ, confidential records pending litigation and purchase or sale of real estate.
Second.
You've got a motion by Wethel, second by Leyendecker. For the record, the Attorney City Council will consult with. The issues to be discussed in closed session is City Attorney Krenna Brumwell. Adrian, would you call the roll, please?
Kavanaugh.
Aye.
Resnick.
Aye.
Staver. Wethel.
Aye.
Roussel. Aye. Sprank.
Aye.
Leyendecker.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0. We are in closed session.